Is it time to chase that aspect of the rally?
That's a really good question. And I think you prefaced it exactly right. And one of the things that's been remarkable about this rally, even though the magnitude has surprised me and it's surprised a lot of people, there was, I think, an underlying rationality. The tech darlings, the cloud companies, the companies that, if anything, were actually benefiting from this environment were the market leaders. It was the value stocks, the cyclical stocks that really lagged. Over particularly the last few sessions, we are starting to see that rotation back towards the laggards. And, to get to the answer to your question, I think you have to be careful. I think we've come a long way very, very quickly here, and understanding that the medical outlook is still the biggest unknown. I think you have to be careful about getting too aggressive in companies that don't have really strong balance sheets, that don't have the wherewithal to withstand a sustained economic, call it a downturn, a struggle. What the market is not really factoring in today is that it's probably not going to be all sunshine and roses in terms of this recovery. It's going to be pretty rocky. We're going to have a lot of things in the short term to deal with on the medical front, and as people just try and get accustomed to redoing the things that they always took for granted in terms of travel and eating at restaurants and so forth. And so those are the short-term things. The longer-term things in terms of the impact of all the stimulus, the potential morphing of deflation fears into inflation fears. To me, that makes it difficult to get very aggressive on some of those cyclical stocks. Can you nibble? And if you're a trader, of course, but I think you have to still be careful.
So, Doug, what are some of the sectors you and the folks at Athena are looking at?
So I would say, we tend to focus more on what I would consider stylistic elements more so than sectors. And I think primarily for the reasons that I just mentioned, I think the strongest call that we have, and this is not an easy one, but growth and quality, secular growers over some of the deep cyclicals and some of the value stocks. That's been a really powerful trade for not just the past couple of weeks or months, but really for the past number of years. I still think in a rocky economic environment that you are going to want to be in some of those secular growers. So, we do have a preference for companies that have a lot of those, time-tested characteristics, really high ROEs and strong balance sheets that can withstand this kind of environment. We particularly like companies with pricing power. But when you start to think about specific areas, there are secular growth opportunities that are really attractive, that are going to be long-lasting, and specifically things like artificial intelligence and 5G and almost everything cloud and e-commerce related, cybersecurity, healthcare infrastructure, those types of things. And again, as a short-term trader, I can't tell you those are must-buys today because most of them have done very, very well. But for long-term investors who have, a 5, 10, 15-year and longer time horizon, I think those are the areas that you really want to stay invested in.
Doug Cohen, thank you so much, as always, for joining us. Doug Cohen, Managing Director and Portfolio Manager at Athena Capital Advisors, with about $6 billion of assets under management, joining us from Boston, talking how to take advantage of a rally that's underpinned by what some see is well more than hope, just based on the nature of it. The idea that the companies that have benefited the most in the rally really are the strongest going forward. That is starting to shift a bit. Although today, interestingly, you're sort of seeing the opposite with the NASDAQ underperforming and the S&P continuing to gain.
Yeah, sorry, President Trump tweeting about those social media companies. So that's brings back the regulatory risk, perhaps, to some of those sectors.
Indeed, and we'll be talking more about that coming up here on Bloomberg Markets. I'm Lisa Abramowitz, along with my co-host and colleague, Paul Sweeney. You're listening to Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. The S&P 500 and Dow building on yesterday's gains. Investors speculating the worst of the economic hit from the pandemic has passed. However, the tech-heavy NASDAQ moving lower this session. Tuesday Morning filed for bankruptcy, adding the discount home goods chain to the list of retailers that have struggled due to shutdowns. The company plans to close about a third of its stores. The company employed about 9,600 people. Quest Diagnostics is offering services to large employers geared at getting their employees back to work safely. The program would include testing for coronavirus, analytics to monitor symptoms and hotspots, and services like temperature monitoring. And GE is selling its lighting unit to smart home company Savant Systems for an undisclosed amount. The transaction is part of GE's ongoing process to be a more focused industrial company. The deal includes a long-term licensing agreement for the use of the GE brand. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
Jelly. Jelly adjective. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org, brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt US Kids, and the Ad Council.
How long? How much? How many? Financial, policy, and medical experts are working on answers 24/7.
What about public debt?
We are listening to those experts 24/7.
Is the Fed effectively widening this wealth gap with its programs?
Because you want answers too.
What's the most important, the trillions in stimulus, the economy's reopening, or the infections curve bending?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Are you interested?
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Hairbands to kids. Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs.
Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
Are you ready for the realist first-hand take of what's happening in the NBA? On their podcast, All the Smoke, former NBA players Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson bring their fiery intensity to the mic, dishing on the latest news and drama from on and off the court without boundaries.
Half man, half amazing. My friend, our brother, Vince Carter, man, welcome to the show.
Yo, what's up, man?
What's up, my brother?
Man,
Search All the Smoke on TuneIn to listen. Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
He does! Fabry wins it!
To standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
Stay on top of everything happening in the pro wrestling universe with the Body Slamming podcasts on TuneIn. For passionate recaps of the most recent SmackDown to a pro wrestler's perspective on life and culture at large, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling to listen. Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top, like my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like,
of course.
Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
Round the Bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks, Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one, not only.
Catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Wondering what to play next? Want to know what other TuneIn listeners are listening to right now? Head to the trending section under Browse to explore the most popular stations and podcasts on TuneIn today. Millions of listeners like you can't be wrong.
Casting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Coming up, we're going to chat with Kevin Tynan. He's the auto analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. We're going to get his thoughts on the overall impact of the pandemic on the auto industry, short-term and long-term. Plus, Jim Anderson, CEO of Social Flow, on President Trump threatening to shut down Twitter and social media after receiving a fact-checking label. But first, let's go to Greg Jarrett of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
S&P rose past 3,000 fall on its average price for the past 200 days as well. Technical levels considered key by chart watchers as two stocks gained for every one that fell. It failed to hold those levels into the close yesterday and is now fluctuating just above and below. We check the numbers every 15 minutes. The S&P is now up just 0.1% up 3. The Dow's up 0.8% up 210, and the Nasdaq is down 0.9%, down 86. 10 years up 730 seconds with a yield of 0.67%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is down 4.25% at $32.88 a barrel, while COMEX gold's down 0.9% at $17.12 even per ounce. The dollar yen 107.77, the euro $1.10.07, and the British pound $1.2248. One of America's biggest indoor water parks, normally packed with frolicking families, has gone dark, a casualty of social distancing. Now the mortgage on the property is in trouble. The Kalahari Water Park and Resort in the Poconos, with 220,000 square feet of twisty slides and splash pads under a climate-controlled dome, has been shuttered since March 17th. Well, that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
Bloomberg opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
About a month ago, Paul, everyone was talking about the transformation in the way that we view society on the heels of COVID-19, and that particularly applied to the auto industry, where sales have plunged and are expected to plunge by 20%. Is that really accurate, though? How much will we see permanent changes to the auto industry as a result of the pandemic? Kevin Tynan's been following this, senior autos analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. Kevin, what's your take here? Are there permanent changes that are going to take hold of the auto industry as a result of the pandemic?
I think so. But I don't think it's structural in the way that 2008, 2009 was. I think there will be improvements to processes, and whether that's at the manufacturing level or at the retail sales level, that I would say this crisis sort of accelerated. But in terms of a teardown and rebuild of the entire automotive process from the build to the sale, I think that's a little bit overstated.
So, Kevin, one point before the pandemic, there was, some reasonable discussion about whether we as a U.S. society had reached peak auto, with Uber and other ride-sharing companies, the fact that more and more young people were moving to urban centers where they could depend more on mass transportation. There was really a debate about peak auto in this country. Where do you think we are as it relates to that? How do you think about long-term auto demand in this country?
Yeah, I think, and looking at the numbers in terms of vehicle registrations by state, which is something I was just compiling that data. And, there is a definitive trend to less private vehicle ownership, and that's over, a decade or so. In terms of the fear of mass transit or the fear of ride hailing, I feel like, there's probably some temporary effect of that, but at the same time, I don't think you're going to get private vehicle ownership and storage and repair and maintenance and insurance for people that live in urban areas. It just doesn't make sense, and I just looked at it. Total cost of ownership on a new vehicle, which is roughly about $39,000, over 5 years, all in on the cost is about $90,000. So, it just doesn't make sense for that sort of structural shift to private vehicle ownership for a lot of cities and people. So maybe a little bit, and maybe for a short term, but over the longer stretch, I think that move away from vehicle ownership is probably going to continue.
Greg Jarrett has a question for you. He wants to pick up a cheap car on the Hertz liquidation that we've all been expecting, given the fact that they've filed for bankruptcy. Are we going to see that?
Yeah, I've looked at this, and I don't think, and I get this question a lot, obviously, since Friday. Look, I don't think it affects the new vehicle market, right? These are off-rental vehicles. So maybe there's a little bit of an impact in residual value in the pre-owned market. But I would even argue that the pre-owned buyer, maybe there's a small subsegment or a niche of that market that may be an off-rental buyer. But pre-owned buyers are probably going to gravitate more to the off-lease, a little bit higher quality, a little higher technology, better equipped vehicles than, sort of this rental car dump. I see that as, the lowest end of the pre-owned market where buyers would be. So I don't see it causing a ripple all the way up to the new vehicle market.
Kevin, just give us a sense of the relative health from a balance sheet and liquidity perspective of the big U.S. automakers right now.
Yeah, liquidity seems to be okay in terms of how long we think the downturn lasts. And again, very different than 08, 09, which started as really a banking crisis and credit markets were frozen. You couldn't get a mortgage. You couldn't get a car loan. This is not that. The automakers couldn't take down any additional liquidity. So this isn't really that. And I think, we're looking at, the consensus for May is already back to a 10, which is funny almost to say, but from an 8.6 to a 10 in a month, if that's the beginning of the trend of recovery, it would seem to say that the worst is behind. So if this is the inflection point, which was April, then I would say that there should be no issues going forward in terms of liquidity on the balance sheet for the large automakers.
Hey, Kevin, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate that update on the auto industry. Kevin Tynan, he's the senior autos analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. He's been covering the auto industry for decades. And Lisa, just some anecdotal evidence. I was meeting with a buddy of mine last weekend who manages an auto dealership, and he kind of confirmed what Kevin was saying, that kind of that March-April timeframe was the trough there because they weren't able to even have anybody into their dealership. Now they're booking appointments, and he said sales are running about 80%, 75 to 80% of normal, which was a big improvement from that March-April timeframe. So hoping that can continue. There is some pent-up demand out there. He was saying people were buying cars. They are leasing cars, just at an obviously reduced rate. But in terms of the trough, it seems to have been hit in March and April. So, if that is in fact the case, maybe the auto industry has kind of weathered the storm here and may do a little bit better than, say, some of the cruise lines or some of the airlines or some of the other consumer-facing businesses that likely will have to deal with a longer rebound than maybe some other industries. So, again, Kevin Tynan giving us the latest on the U.S. auto industry. Right now, let's head down to Washington, D.C. for world and national headlines with Nathan Hager. Nathan, what do you have for us?
Well, Paul, Dr. Anthony Fauci says there is a good chance we could have a coronavirus vaccine by the end of this year if all the right things fall into place. The head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases spoke to CNN this morning.
And I said it would be about a year to a year and a half, and that was in January. So a year from January is December.
Fauci also says recent instances of social crowding, like that pool party in Missouri over the weekend, are very troubling. Republican Senator Mitt Romney is calling for an end to unsubstantiated claims against Joe Scarborough involving the death of a former staffer, a conspiracy theory that President Trump has promoted. Romney took to Twitter moments ago saying enough already and called Scarborough a friend. His late staffer's husband has called on Twitter to remove President Trump's tweets about the case. It hasn't, but it did put a fact check on another presidential tweet about mail-in balloting, and that has the president threatening to regulate or shut down social media. There's a new named storm in the Atlantic, and it's already made landfall. Tropical storm Bertha formed this morning about 30 miles off the coast of Charleston, South Carolina. It is expected to weaken to a tropical depression and bring heavy rain as it moves inland. Weather's looking better for a major milestone in the private space race. A SpaceX rocket is set for liftoff from NASA's Kennedy Space Center with 2 NASA astronauts on board. Bob Behnken is one of them.
I think continuing to push into space challenges us as Americans, challenges us as scientists and engineers, and I think that continued push is important.
It'll be the first manned launch from U.S. soil in 9 years, the first ever for a private company, set for 4:33 this afternoon, Wall Street time. Global news, 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
With COVID-19,
where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Not all heroes wear capes, but most wear tights. Keep up with everything happening in the wild world of pro wrestling with a podcast on TuneIn. For expert analysis of the latest wrestling storylines, turn on the WWE podcast.
Big Steve-al edition.
Or listen to the Steve Austin Show for no-holds-barred conversations with wrestling's biggest personalities.
Because now on the show, everybody's kind of the same size, but as soon as I saw you, it's been.
For these and more, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling.
Where do sports, culture, and basketball nostalgia collide? On their podcast, Knuckleheads, NBA veterans Quentin Richardson and Darius Miles sit down with athletes, musicians, and entertainers to get brutally honest, totally unguarded conversations about everything from current events to untold stories from the golden era of sports.
Shaquille O'Neal. You know that, right? I tried to tip dunk all the free throw line one time.
Search Knuckleheads on TuneIn to listen.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games.
Bergeron, he scores!
With game replay on TuneIn, you can listen to every power play, slap shot, and goal of the 2019-2020 season so far.
Suter to Cunnin to Fiala, he scores!
For a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening.
Wondering what to play next? Want to know what other TuneIn listeners are listening to right now? Head to the trending section under Browse to explore the most popular stations and podcasts on TuneIn today. Millions of listeners like you can't be wrong.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
Round the Bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks, Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one, not only.
Catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn. Looking for your daily fix of NFL news and analysis?
In that. So we had to blow it up and do Super Bowl predictions instead.
Look no further than the Pick Six podcast, where CBS sports writer Will Brinson gets you up to speed with what's trending in the NFL that day, so that you're always in the know.
Yeah, it's pretty revealing of Brinson's methodology for predictions. When he gets mad at people for predicting good teams are going to win the Super Bowl or good players are going to win major awards. That's how you wind up.
Search Pick Six on TuneIn to listen.
And breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
The S&P edges down. The gauge has been fluctuating near 3,000, and its average price for the past 200 days. Technical levels considered key by chart watchers. Now, it failed to hold those levels at the close yesterday. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. The S&P is down 0.5%, down 15. The Dow is up 0.3%, down up 80, and the Nasdaq is down 1.8%, down 171. The 10-year is up 10.30 seconds with a yield of 0.66%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is down 5.5% at $32.48 a barrel, with COMEX gold down 1% at $17.10.90 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.72. The euro $1.0996, and the British pound $1.2232. Ralph Lauren has reopened a significant portion of its global store network and will accelerate its digital plans as pandemic restrictions ease around the world. Chief Executive Officer Patrice Loubet says all stores in China and Korea are back to business. Japan and Australia are set to return. In the U.S., where states are gradually lifting restrictions, about half the labeled stores have reopened. They're up 1.8%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, President Donald Trump threatened to regulate or shutter social media companies, a warning apparently aimed at Twitter after it began fact-checking his tweets. Lots of questions in the marketplace. That's knocking down the NASDAQ off about 1.8% today. The question is, can the president do that? Jim Anderson, CEO of Social Flow, based in New York City, has some answers for us. Social Flow, in full disclosure, Social Flow is a platform used by Bloomberg for social media purposes. Jim, thanks so much for joining us here. So, an interesting response by the president to the fact-checking that was instituted by Twitter. I guess the basic question is, what can the president really do?
Well, it's a great question, Paul. I mean, there's so much to unpack in this story. I guess the first thing I'll say is that Twitter's labels of President Trump's tweets were around the tweets about balloting by mail, not the conspiracy about the Joe Scarborough having had something to do with the death of a former staffer. And that's an interesting distinction, because so much of the energy yesterday was around, oh, goodness, this is a terrible tweet. How could President Trump do this? What's Twitter going to do? And notably, they did not do anything. They didn't label that tweet. They didn't remove it. They didn't do anything. They instead focused on an area around mail-in balloting, which is its own set of controversy. So that's the first thing I would note is I think they felt like they were on more solid ground with the mail-in balloting than they were about the Joe Scarborough issue.
I'm struggling to understand what Twitter is. Is it a media platform?
Well, it is a platform. I think, you sort of wrapped up in that question is what is a media platform? What is a media company? And certainly you've seen Facebook and Twitter both say they are not media companies, and they certainly don't fit the traditional definition. They don't. The FCC doesn't define them as a media company. They don't print a newspaper. But that being said, those are both amazingly successful advertising sales platforms. That's not how we normally as consumers think about them. We think about the Twitter or the Facebook experience, but they derive almost 100% of their revenue from advertising. So if you define media platform as one that sells advertising, well, then they certainly fit that definition. I think part of what we're all wrestling with is that they're not like anything we've historically had when it comes to radio and television and newspapers. They're something really different.
So I guess it kind of begs the question, what ultimately do you think the responsibility is of the Facebooks of the world and the Twitters of the world and the other social media companies who, in large part, just, it's user-generated content? Do they have a responsibility to fact-check?
Well, they have a responsibility to society, I'll say. A responsibility to fact-check. The challenge with fact-checking is, we would all love to think that facts are wonderfully objective things, and in some cases, they are, right? It's Wednesday today in New York City, at least. It may be a different day if you go across the date line, et cetera. But we're not talking about those kinds of objective facts. We're talking about conspiracy theories and innuendo. And all you really need to do is turn on any of the other more traditional media, turn on television. And depending on the channel in which you consume your news, you're going to get very, very different answers. So I think it's a very slippery slope for the platforms to start getting into fact-checking. And I think, it's tough to understand how yesterday's decisions by Twitter to label two of Donald Trump's tweets is going to turn out well for them. I mean, you already saw the blowback from him and from his campaign, and I suspect they're going to get a tremendous amount of criticism. And so it's almost a no-win situation for the platforms to say, hey, I'm going to be the one who does the fact check, and I'm going to label or remove content that doesn't meet my standards.
Well, and I guess the other side of this story is Facebook, and there was a report in the Wall Street Journal yesterday about how even Facebook's own experts found that, yes, the platform has actually enhanced divisions in the country and across the world and sort of created an increased partisanship, and that the platform could do something about it but chose not to because ultimately it drove traffic. That was a business decision, and it seems in contrast to what Twitter is doing. Should Facebook be rewarded for that, at least with respect to shares and with respect to the way that it's perceived, given the fact that it does have some social responsibility, but it also has a responsibility to its shareholders?
Yeah, it's interesting. I read that same article, and I've seen commentary about that. And I think anybody objectively, you don't have to be inside of Facebook to note that it can be used for divisive topics and tends to, at least in some cases, increase polarization. Saying that they did it purely for their business interests, yes, they do have an obligation to their shareholders. But I think there's a missing piece of that, which is once they start doing that, especially if they talk about how they're going to start policing speech or fact-checking or, removing content, I mean, it's a remarkably slippery slope. And again, I'm going to go back to the no-win scenario. The minute they start talking about doing that, they get highlighted for being inconsistent, being unfair, manipulating elections, all kinds of things like that, yes, will hurt their business, but also I think are just a very untenable position for them. And I think that's one of the reasons why you saw Facebook go down the route of creating effectively what they like to call their Supreme Court, which is a non-Facebook-controlled body that will help them be sort of the arbiter of these types of decisions. But like any Supreme Court, like our U.S. Supreme Court, this arbitration and these decisions happen well after the fact. I mean, we're talking years down the road, I would imagine, before these kinds of things get hashed out.
So, Jim, I mean, to the extent there is some movement to regulate some of these social media platforms, is it something that would come from the Federal Communications Commission or the courts? How would it even be affected, do you think?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, you're talking significant jurisdictional issues, but I don't immediately jump to the jurisdictional issues. I jump to the politics of it, right? So it's politically sort of advantageous for President Trump right now to talk about regulating the platforms. But, historically, Republicans and conservatives have not been heavy on regulation. So you're sort of getting what the headlines are, which is, somebody saying we should regulate these platforms. And then the devil is truly in the details. Do you really expect a Republican president, a Republican-controlled Senate, if we got a Democratic House, do we expect, sort of bipartisan consensus to come in terms of how those platforms are regulated. I will say, I mean, it is interesting. They get criticized from both sides, right? You've got Democrats criticizing platforms for sort of one set of issues, Republicans criticizing for a related set of issues coming at it from very different sides. So there is bipartisan agitation, for lack of a better word. Whether that emerges in consensus and which agencies or how that regulation will play out, I think that's going to be years in the making. And probably antitrust is the most likely issue to really come to the fore, at least for Facebook, not so much for Twitter.
Jim Anderson, thank you so much for weighing in. Jim Anderson, Chief Executive Officer of Social Flow in New York. And just for full disclosure, Social Flow is a platform used by Bloomberg for social media purposes. Interesting to see the reaction in shares on Twitter, the response to President Trump's request, or basically his criticism of Twitter. Some people were saying, well, sell Twitter shares. And then other people were saying quickly that they would buy them. It became a partisan issue whether you bought or sold Twitter shares. And I guess that the conclusion today, Paul, has been sell for now, I guess.
That's right. Yeah, interesting. It'll be, I think, just really a can of worms here. So, I think it's a really difficult thing to manage and for these social media companies, free speech.
Indeed. We're going to be driving the conversation forward on that and much more ahead. I'm Lisa Abramowitz with Paul Sweeney. This is Bloomberg Markets.
At the start of every day,
we're all in uncharted territory looking for ways to support our communities. At Dell Technologies, we're making sure small businesses have the right tech solutions. Dell Technologies advisors are here for you, helping small businesses stay connected and productive while working remotely with Windows 10 Pro and Microsoft Teams. We're standing by you every step of the way. Call us today on 0800 169 1745. That's 0800 169 1745.
You love TuneIn for live-breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Ready for a one-of-a-kind look at the NFL? On the PFF NFL podcast, Steve Palazzolo and Sam Munson interpret the unique stats of Pro Football Focus to analyze the league, uncover secret superstars, and discuss which teams to watch out for in the next Super Bowl.
Let's talk some football. Let's do it, Steve. All sorts of stuff. We're going to do most improved defenses around the NFL. Solomon Wilcots, our very own. He went into some detail over at PFF.com. Most improved defenses around the NFL.
Search PFF NFL on TuneIn to listen.
Are you ready for the realest first-hand take of what's happening in the NBA? On their podcast, All the Smoke, former NBA players Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson bring their fiery intensity to the mic, dishing on the latest news and drama from on and off the court without boundaries.
Half man, half amazing. My friend, our brother, Vince Carter, man, welcome to the show.
Yo, what's up, man? What's up, my brother? Man,
Search All the Smoke on TuneIn to listen.
Hey, y'all, we're taking the Marty Party to a whole new level with the Marty Smith's America podcast with Gerald McCoy.
I truly believe that Carolina made a mistake playing Cam, though. This is not a personal shot at Teddy Bridgewater. This could have been Andy Dalton. This could have been whoever they brought in. Cam has so much left. Somebody's really getting a great one, man. And I don't think people really understand what they're getting.
Search Marty Smith America to listen.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
round the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
The Fed action, essentially unlimited quantitative easing.
People have had the rug pulled out from under them overnight.
This could be a lower for longer hit.
The economic news seems to be getting worse and worse.
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
It's possible that this is going to be a scarring recession.
The Fed is really showing that they're doing whatever it takes.
A lot of people don't expect that the economy will reopen in full.
This is really hitting industrial America, and it's a major crisis.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Coming up, we're going to chat with a good friend, Vince Signorella, global macro strategist for Bloomberg, on the market rally and whether China is manipulating its currency. Plus, at 12 noon Eastern, we will have Bob Chapek, Disney CEO. He'll be speaking with Bloomberg's Candy Chang from Orlando, Florida. But first, let's go to Greg Jarrett of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Well, we moved a little bit down, Paul. Investors are shying away from the high-flying tech shares in favor of equities most beaten down by the pandemic. The S&P is edged lower, though 3 shares did gain for every 2 that fell. How about those small and mid-caps? Lori Calvasina, RBC Capital Markets.
Frankly, as I've talked to investors the last 6 weeks or so, there's a lot of doubts about whether or not we're going to be back to normal anytime soon. That's a limiting factor on small-cap performance. That being said, if you think that we have seen the worst of the economic data in 2Q, and as John mentioned, sequentially it starts to get a little bit better than here, you don't want to be underweight either. So we think sort of keeping a balance between your small caps and your large caps makes sense at this point.
We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day. S&P is down 0.5%, down 16. The Dow is up 0.4%, up 107. And the NASDAQ is down 2%, down 183. The 10-year is up 9/32 with a yield of 0.66%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is down 5.7% at $32.39 a barrel, while COMEX gold's down 1.1% at $17.0950 an ounce. The dollar yen, 107.85. The euro, $1.970. And the British pound, $1.2211. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Bloomberg Markets continues now with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
Thank you so much, Greg. We are looking at a down market, at least in the S&P and NASDAQ now. Wow, that NASDAQ decline has really accelerated. But let's take a look at small and mid-cap shares, which have generally outperformed the S&P by the greatest margin in 2 years so far this month. Dave Wilson, Bloomberg Stocks editor, here with us. How are small and mid-cap stocks faring on a day like today?
Well, they're not extending their lead, that's for sure. The Russell 2000 index is down 0.5%, and the S&P 500 is lower by 0.4%. Now, one of the Russell's sharpest declines belongs to La Jolla Pharmaceutical, whose ticker is LJPC. The developer of a drug for malaria has lost 24% after U.S. regulators approved a competing treatment. Now, developers of coronavirus vaccines are lower after surging earlier this year. VBI Vaccines, ticker VBIV, has fallen more than 15%, and Novavax, ticker NVAX, has dropped more than 11%. One of the Russell's biggest gains belongs to Mersana Therapeutics, ticker MRSN. The drug developers climbed 31% after reporting favorable study data on a treatment for ovarian cancer. And Golar LNG, ticker GLNG, has risen 11.5%. Dow Jones reported that the liquefied natural gas company of Russia's Gazprom are in talks with Cameroon's national energy company to increase LNG production off the coast of that African country.
Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson, thank you so much. Looking at the markets here, kind of a mixed day today. Here, kind of got the NASDAQ taking it on the chin. The Dow Jones Industrials eking out a modest gain. The S&P kind of also a little bit in the red. To get a sense of kind of where we are with the markets today and year to date, and kind of how the market's discounting future events. Vince Signorella, global macro strategist for Bloomberg News, joins us on the phone. So, Vince, kind of a awkward day today, but I'd love to just get your thoughts on kind of where you think traders are, the mindset is of traders out there as they're trying to digest all this negative economic news, trying to get a sense of whether we're at the bottom for the economy and earnings. What are you hearing out there?
Well, it's actually interesting. It's a really good question, Paul. But I'm actually got a couple of algo traders this morning asking me my opinions on the China situation, what that risk scenario would look like, and if it should go the wrong way. What are the assets that I would think would move the fastest, either up or down? And so that's really, I think, what's really catching the market's tone today. And it's why we're seeing the NASDAQ off right now 1.8%, while the Dow's holding its own. The industrials higher on the hopes that the recovery or that markets are going to reopen sooner. But the tech space, which has rallied quite a bit and leading this, falling back on potential tensions rising with China.
You pointed to a story in the South China Morning Post about China looking to retaliate against the United States if the U.S. does pass some sort of censure in some capacity to the security law having to do with Hong Kong. I'm trying to understand when the market's going to take these threats seriously, because the rhetoric has been getting increasingly heated, and markets, for the most part, have been saying, China-U.S. tensions, going to the pool, we're reopened, that's cool.
It's an excellent point, Lisa, because this is not new news. We had a story out last night, similar kind of thing. Fox had a story out 24 hours earlier, kind of the same thing. And, you know, the news, the media continues to repeat. Sorry to say old news, but it's, you know, we've known that the Senate has passed.
Wait, are you doing a new one instead of fake news? Old news. Okay, carry on. Carry on, Vince.
No, we know the Senate has passed this bill. We know the House has passed it even before them. It's all on the president's desk, waiting to see if he will respond. And yesterday, in the Rose Garden press conference, he said, "I'll let you know by the end of the week." So we're all waiting on pins and needles of whether or not there will be sanctions on China. We simply just don't know. And it is a real threat, it is a real possibility. And whenever the news comes out, the markets, at least the tech space, reacts to it. But at the same time, the rest of the market is sort of sitting there, just as you said, waiting to see what the real story is. And the only real story we know for sure right now is the U.S. states and the markets are reopening, and we've seen good progress in that space, and the economy is moving forward on that. Whether or not the other shoe will drop, which is China, which will work against that, will actually happen, we're still waiting to find out.
So, Vince, I'm looking at the yuan right here. It's weaker again today, 7.17. That's weaker from the 7.0 that it had been pegged at before. So clearly, China letting its currency depreciate, which, of course, a weaker currency makes China more competitive and life harder for U.S. exporters. So is that a kind of a clear sign to traders that, you know, China's taking this seriously? They're willing to weaponize, if you will, their currency?
Well, you know, actually, that's an incredibly interesting point. Yeah, last night they pegged it stronger. They were trying to hold it back. And what this really is looking to me is that the traders in the market is basically saying to the People's Bank of China, and it usually doesn't pay to go against the central bank, but they're basically saying to the central bank, we don't think you can hold it as tightly as you have in the past. If you're amping up the rhetoric, the currency is going to have to stumble. And there are a lot of bets being put on right now. I mean, the forward markets, actually, big options trade went through this morning in the offshore currency at 7.30, and it's currently trading at 7.19. So that's a big gap where traders are willing to take the chance that this is maybe getting away from the central bank. If you're going to make great strides militarily or economically in Hong Kong, you're going to expect, you know, the G10 countries to respond. And certainly you can't have a strong currency in that scenario.
Vince Signorella, thank you so much. Love speaking with you. Vince Signorella is our global macro strategist at Bloomberg. Also follow him on the Squawk, providing commentary all day. I do want to bring you this news, especially in light of the jobless claims number that we're going to get tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. New York time. Boeing plans to start involuntary layoffs. They have already notified nearly 7,000 members, 6,770 members. And this goes to a real question still in the market. How much of the furloughs, of the layoffs that we have seen so far will be permanently eliminated jobs from the economy? How quickly can we see some sort of transformation of the labor market from the old to the new, and what we need with respect to contact tracing and anything else that can provide additional jobs to people right now amid the highest unemployment rate since the Great Depression?
Yeah, it's interesting to see. This is going to be Boeing, obviously a significant, employer of significantly great blue collar and white collar jobs. So have to see how permanent this becomes. Right now, let's head down to Washington, D.C. for world and national headlines. Nathan Hager, what do you have for us?
Well, Paul, Dr. Anthony Fauci is sounding optimistic a COVID-19 vaccine could be ready by the end of this year. The head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases tells CNN it's possible if things fall into the right place, but he is warning against complacency.
Please don't be overconfident, because the effect of spreading is not going to be seen for 2, 3, and maybe even more weeks. And at that time, you can have the uptick.
Fauci says recent instances of social crowding, like that Memorial Day weekend pool party at Lake of the Ozarks, Missouri, are very troubling. Joe Biden isn't mincing words about President Trump refusing to be seen wearing a mask in public and calling him politically correct for doing it himself.
He's a fool, an absolute fool to talk that way. I mean, every leading doc in the world is saying we should wear a mask when you're in a crowd.
In his first face-to-face interview since the pandemic, Biden tells CNN the president is stoking deaths by not wearing a mask. He also apologized again for his comments last week that black voters who are thinking of supporting the president over him, quote, ain't black. In his words, I shouldn't have been such a wise guy. 4 Minneapolis police officers have been quickly fired after a viral video of a death in police custody. It showed one white officer pressing his knee into the neck of a black man, George Floyd, until he passed out. Attorney Ben Crump is representing Floyd's family.
9 minutes on his neck. Just imagine, take a stopwatch and put 9 minutes and set the time on your cell phone.
Floyd's sister Bridget tells NBC's Today Show the fired officers should be charged with murder. Global news on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
What began in China has expanded worldwide.
Is it China that's going to lead that consumer recovery?
What have we learned?
I'm curious as to what you're monitoring most closely in the news flow.
What can we predict?
Are you seeing a time when you can expect recovery in global travel?
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
Do people realize that those numbers are going to get a lot worse?
Tonight at 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
To buy your home, you became a house hunting ace, learned about loans, scoured neighborhoods, and asked the right questions. Now you're queen of your castle. If you manage that, you can get your retirement plan on track. Visiting aceyourretirement.org can help. With 401k tips and smart saving strategies, you'll feel empowered to own your retirement like you own your home. Go to aceyourretirement.org, because when it comes to clearing financial hurdles, you're an ace. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Bloomberg and Eaton Vance are proud to present a Boston Pop salute to our heroes. This Independence Day, the orchestra's 4th of July tradition continues. The program will feature guest artists, highlights from past fireworks displays, new music paying tribute to the heroes of the current health crisis, and honoring the memories of those we have lost. Watch and listen Saturday, July 4th, starting at 8 Eastern, exclusively on Bloomberg Television and right here on Bloomberg Radio.
Hi, everyone. Al Roker here. As a guy with his own catchphrase, I appreciate that after 75 years, Smokey's only said,
only you can prevent wildfires.
But I'm filling in because there's a lot more to report. Like when it's dry or windy. Be careful burning yard waste, because wildfires can even start in your neck of the woods. Go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
You're living in a world built on science.
These days, we could all do with a bit more space, couldn't we? So how about building your own home office in the garden? With a complete kit from Simply Self Build, it's easy. You might not even need planning permission. And what's a home office by day can become a home cinema by night. Simply clever, simply better, simply cheaper. Home offices from Simply Self Build, bringing more space to your place. SimplySelfBuild.com.
Switch on Acorn TV, the brand new streaming service featuring world-class TV from Britain and beyond. Watch exclusive premieres like the colourful crime drama Queens of Mystery.
Once you have eliminated the impossible,
whatever remains, however improbable,
must be the truth.
And fan favourites like Inspector George Gently.
I'm just an old copper doing his job.
If you love drama with a little mystery thrown in, enjoy 30 days free with code ACORN30. Then just $4.99 a month. No adverts, no contract, cancel anytime. Join online today at acorn.tv.
Right now, we're all depending on the digital world that little bit more. And Barclays Digital Eagles are here to help everyone develop the skills they need. From Tea and Teach, supporting those who are new online, to Code Playground, teaching kids how to code. Since 2013, we've been helping everyone develop digital skills. And now more than ever, we're here to help. To find out more, search Digital Eagles. Barclays, we're working to make money work for you.
This is a message from the government. There is new guidance to help businesses and employees who cannot work from home be COVID-19 secure at work. The advice will help you conduct a risk assessment, put social distancing measures in place, improve hygiene and cleaning in the workplace, and look after the well-being of your employees. Every workplace is different. Use the guidance to make your business COVID-19 secure. Access the support you need at gov.uk/working safely. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
A half-price dream holiday, wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free, wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the Uswitch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
Picture in your mind a stylish Audi with striking LED headlights, sporty alloy wheels, and some of our most advanced features, including a 10-inch digital cockpit and smart assistant systems like lane departure warning. Picture what that Audi looks like. Now think smaller. The Audi A1. It's not a small car, it's a small Audi. Visit audi.co.uk. Audi. Vorsprung durch Technik.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks edge toward the red as investors assess tensions between Washington and Beijing over Hong Kong and focus on the reopening of the global economy. General Electric reached an agreement to sell its most 130-year-old consumer lighting business to Savant Systems. That's a smart home company. Boeing has concluded voluntary layoff programs and has moved to involuntary. President and CEO Dave Calhoun issued a letter to employees notifying the first 6,800 U.S. team members this week that they'll be affected. Boeing stock is little changed. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500's down 0.2%, down 6. The Dow's up 0.7%, up 160. And the Nasdaq's down 1.5%, down 140. The 10-year is up 9/32 with a yield of 0.66%. West Texas Intermediate crude's down 5.5% at 32.46 a barrel, while COMEX gold is down 0.9% at 17.1250 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.81. The euro $1.979. The British pound $1.2217. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Paul, do you do sports gambling?
I do not.
Okay, that doesn't surprise me. Evidently, the people who do sports gambling have migrated over to the stock market, and we've heard this reported increasingly. There was actually a great story looking at that in the Financial Times with some data about brokerage accounts and what we're seeing, which really raises a question about the sentiment in the retail sector. Sure, the bettors, but also mom and pop investors who are looking at the wild swings and wondering what to make of it. Joining us now is someone with a front row seat to that sentiment, Julia Carlson, founder and chief executive officer of Financial Freedom Wealth Management Group, joining us from Newport, Oregon. Julia, we're so glad to have you on the show. Really important to get a sense of the retail component, especially since a lot of people are saying that this aspect of the market is accounting for a greater proportion of the sentiment right now than others. Can you give us a sense of the retail client that you deal with and where their mind is at right now?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Lisa and Paul.
Clients, what I am feeling are calmer now. And I think this definitely is perspective on where you are at in the country. We are in Oregon, it's rural. And I think given the magnitude of the rally that's happened off of the March 23rd lows, clients are actually pleasantly surprised looking at their account values. And I think some of our clients that chose not to look back in March and were, either fearful or just saying, I'm going to just not watch. When we say encourage them to go in, look, it's really not that bad. They do look and they're like, wow, I am surprised. So we are seeing, I would say the best word for it is a sense of calmness out there.
It's interesting, Julia, a sense of calmness here in the financial markets. Lisa and I often comment that, a little bit of surprise in how the market has rebounded off of the bottom, given some of the dire economic news that we get in terms of jobless claims and GDP prints and so on and so forth. Has your clients, where are they on kind of the risk curve here? As you talk to them, are they willing to take on a little bit more risk, maybe shift from bonds into equities, or maybe get a little bit more further out on the risk curve for some of their investments?
Well, I don't know if I would say adding risk at this point, but we definitely, when the market was low, we were rebalancing, and so putting into positions where we're putting them in a position to capture more of the upside as it recovered. And so I would say, no, we're not adding risk, because most of our clients are in retirement. They've built their wealth. They want that more moderate portfolio that aren't going to be, subject to these wild swings. And although we do feel very confident in the long-term opportunity in equities, that those remain attractive, especially compared to the alternative like cash or fixed income, we're not necessarily willing to say let's add risk at this point, because most likely there may be a pullback here in the shorter term.
I wonder if 60-40 still works given how low bond yields are. Are you still recommending that kind of allocation to bonds as a hedge?
Well, I would say yes, we are in alignment with that 60-40, although we don't expect a lot from that 40 moving forward. It's more for that stability and peace of mind part of the portfolio.
So, Julia, we saw Bankrate came out with a study recently that about 27% of working or recently unemployed adults with retirement savings have either tapped into or plan to tap into their retirement funds as an immediate source of income because of the pandemic. Have you seen that from your client base?
We haven't. When I read that statistic, I was wondering what was the statistic before all this happened, but it sounds like it's in regards to the people that have lost their jobs or have been on unemployment. I mean, for the most part, even our clients that are still working, they're spending less. And our clients that are in retirement are actually stopping their RMDs because they can for 2020. And they are reducing that monthly income just because they're not traveling. They're not out spending the money that they were, 3 or 4 short months ago.
Just looking forward, what are you looking for in order to advise your clients perhaps to take a little risk off the table and temper their expectations for the year?
Well, I think that the amount of stimulus that's come into not only now in the U.S. but worldwide, I think that is what we're seeing in these stock market rallies. But we're also, I think, pricing in that we are going back to work, that we will get a vaccine. We're pricing in all of these perfect scenarios that there's going to be something that rocks the boat and comes in and has a pullback. So we always recommend that you stay invested per your risk profile, per your financial objectives, and wouldn't necessarily say let's add risk because there is still uncertainty in how this will all play out.
Julia, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate your perspective. Julia Carlson, she's founder and CEO of Financial Freedom Wealth Management. located in a beautiful Newport, Oregon, right on the coast there. A beautiful part of the country. Kind of saying, stay the course here. The rebound has been pronounced coming off of that initial sell-off, but Joy was suggesting, stay the course. There certainly could be some more volatility, but certainly stay invested. Coming up at noon Eastern, Bob Chapek, the new CEO of the Walt Disney Company, talking about reopening those Disney parks across the country. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. The S&P 500 has turned negative as tech heavyweights drag down the index alongside healthcare stocks. The move could be attributed to U.S. tensions with China. JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon sees a good chance for a rapid recovery. Dimon said unemployment could drop to 10% by the end of the year. He gives credit to government stimulus programs and the strength of the consumer going into the pandemic. Few stocks tell more about the country's path to recovery than trucking firms. Virtually every facet of economic activity relies on some transportation component. Freight activity is rebounding from depressed levels based on Truckstop.com's market demand index. It advanced 27% in the week through May 15th in its fourth straight gain. And Amazon is said to be in talks to buy driverless vehicle startup Zoox. Other companies in the automotive and chip industries have also had talks with Zoox about an investment. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Market upheavals.
The narrative is driven by uncertainty about the virus.
Political reversals.
It's not clear that some of the Republicans up on the Hill are agreed with the Republican White House.
Economic shifts.
The macro clearly being driven by the coronavirus outbreak.
Everything seems to be in motion.
Will it also mean a global recession in your view now?
But here, you're on solid ground.
Looking forward to guiding you through all of this.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
He does! Fabry wins it!
To standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in a front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I jumped high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn. Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind. Giving up, I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, And it may be recency bias, having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Wondering what to play next? Want to know what other TuneIn listeners are listening to right now? Head to the trending section under Browse to explore the most popular stations and podcasts on TuneIn today. Millions of listeners like you can't be wrong.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Ready for a one-of-a-kind look at the NFL? On the PFF NFL podcast, Steve Palazzolo and Sam Munson interpret the unique stats of Pro Football Focus to analyze the league, uncover secret superstars, and discuss which teams to watch out for in the next Super Bowl.
Let's talk some football. Let's do it, Steve. All sorts of stuff. We're going to do most improved defenses around the NFL. Solomon Wilcots, our very own. He went into some detail over at PFF.com. Most improved defenses around the
Search
NFL.
PFF NFL on TuneIn to listen.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Coming up, we'll have a conversation about the state of higher education given the COVID-19 shutdowns and the question around who will actually return to campus. Plus, we'll hear from Disney's chief executive as they begin to reopen their parks. Right now, though, let's head over to Greg Jarrett for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Lisa, investors are shying away from the high-flying tech shares in favor of those stocks most beaten down by the pandemic. S&P's edging lower, though 3 shares still gained for every 2 that fell. You know, the EIA weekly petroleum supply data are due out tomorrow, but today oil futures are retreating with benchmark U.S. prices down by nearly 6%, pressured by news reports that say Russia is in favor of easing up on supply cuts. Planned in July. We checked 15 minutes throughout the trading day. S&P 500 is a little changed. The Dow is up 0.8%, up nearly 200, and the Nasdaq is down 1.25%, down 114. The 10-year is up 0.832, the yield 0.66%. Let's look at what crude is doing. West Texas Intermediates down 5.2% at $32.57 a barrel, with COMEX gold down 0.9% at $17.1270 an ounce. The dollar yen stands at 107.80. The euro $1.977. The British pound $1.20. $2.20. We told you about some beaten down tech stocks. Let's look at a couple. Twitter is down 4.6%. Apple is down 0.4%. Netflix is down 3.3%. Now that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg.
Lisa, it's interesting. Coming up at noon Eastern time, we're going to have Bob Chapek. He's the new CEO of the Walt Disney Company, replacing icon Bob Iger. Really critical decision today from the Walt Disney Company. They announced some plans when they're going to be reopening their parks, and it looks like in mid-July for the Florida parks is when they're going to open those, and so it's a big move for them. Those parks have been closed wide for a couple of months. They recently reopened Shanghai, which was their $5 billion park that they launched 4 or 5 years ago. But this is really critical for the company, Lisa. It's just a big profit source. It's a consistent profit source for the company, and they got to figure out a way to open these parks in a safe manner.
In a safe manner, but there also is a question about whether people will go. And this, frankly, has been one of my questions underscoring the entire episode. If we get a resurgence in virus cases in 2 weeks, say, I'm wondering whether people are going to have less confidence in some of the reopening credos that we're getting from around the world. Are people going to want to go to some of these parks with masks on, social distancing, having to wait in longer lines, let's say, to get on the rides? I don't know if they even have experience with this, Paul.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think, if you look at some of the parts of the country where they haven't been hit as hard as, say, the New York market or some of the other ones that have been hit hard, it appears that people are willing to take a higher level of risk here. I mean, we saw that crazy footage over the weekend from the Lake of the Ozarks where the young people, were at the pool party and certainly not social distancing, not wearing masks, certainly risky behavior, particularly for perhaps older relatives here. But I think, the Walt Disney Company is a really buttoned up company. I think they're going to manage this pretty well. Nobody has more experience in managing, outdoor theme parks than the Walt Disney Company. But I think they're going to take it slow in terms of some of their precautions.
Paul, I'm looking at Disney shares right now. They're down more than 16% so far year to date. You covered this company as an analyst for years. I'm trying to understand why they're not benefiting more from the traction they're seeing in Disney Plus. The idea that they could be a real viable competitor to Netflix, which has gotten absolutely rewarded for becoming one of the main sources of entertainment right now as everybody has these shutdowns. Yeah. Why haven't they performed better on the heels of that performance?
You know what it is? It's because the Disney Plus, as good as the subscriber numbers are, they're just not generating any profits, and they're not going to for some time. So what the stock reflects here is just a cut to the earnings estimates resulting from the pandemic's impact on Disney's other businesses, the filmed entertainment business, nobody's going to movies, and of course, the parks and resorts as well. So that's kind of what's happening here. Hey, let's bring in Tara LaChapelle. Tara LaChapelle is a Bloomberg opinion media columnist to join us right now. Tara, we do have Bob Chapek on Bloomberg Television coming up at noon Eastern. What do you think are some of the critical points he needs to get across?
Well, I think it's interesting. Disney just presented its plan for reopening Disney World in Orlando, Florida. And, they didn't really get a lot of questions on their plan. It was a very thorough plan detailing how they're going to keep it safe for their guests and for employees. But I think there's still, some questions that will arise as they get back open because, different things like making sure that guests are going to keep their masks on. And what do you do when it's, 100 degrees outside and your employees are wearing those for long shifts, and just simple things like, menus and seating and, SeaWorld also presented today, and they have to worry about the water parks. How do you wear a mask in a water park? So I think it's going to be things like that arise as they get back open and start to see how this goes and how we adjust to this. So he might get questions on that. And then also, how do you keep the theme parks alive and well when, you are trying to invest in Disney Plus and try to keep fueling that side of the business at a crucial moment.
Tara, I'm sure you've seen the photographs and the advertisements for matching masks that are in tandem with your bathing suit. You can actually buy them as a pair. So perhaps for the water park side of things, that might be the way that people go. There's also a question of how willing people will be to travel, to get on an airplane right now. Is there a sense that they have a good view into pent-up demand that could be from further away travelers?
I think they do think there's a lot of pent-up demand, but I wonder if when the moment comes, if people who say that they want to go will actually do so and get on a plane and travel right now, and if it makes sense to do that. I think what they were seeing in Shanghai when they opened that park was that it was a lot of locals driving that early demand as they reopened a couple weeks ago. So it'll be interesting to see like how many of the people coming to Disney Orlando are local or not. Disney had talked previously about how it's a different case in California, where that park does seem to be a lot of locals, as opposed to Florida, which draws a lot of visitors who fly into Florida for those visits. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But what I see from readers and people on Twitter is like everyone's really excited for these to get back up and running. I just don't know how I'd feel about wearing a mask for, a long day like that out in the sun and making sure your kids have it. So it's going to be a tricky thing to navigate for sure.
Tara LaChapelle, thank you so much for being with us, Bloomberg Opinion media columnist. I will say, Paul, I do wonder about wearing those outfits, dressing up like Mickey Mouse, or how about, the princesses? Are they going to wear masks? How does that disrupt the whole experience?
Yeah, I suspect that they will. But again, it's going to be interesting. Universal Studios in Florida, they're going to open June 5th. So Disney's going to get about a month here to kind of see how things go, what works, what doesn't work. I'm sure they're going to learn a lot from the folks at Universal Studios in Orlando.
Will Elsa wear a mask? And then,
right.
And will it be endearing? Because will children see sort of something relatable, or will it wreck the magic? I know these are small questions, and yet this is essential to a park that presents an image and a dream to so many individuals, especially kids. Right now, let's head down to our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C. Nathan Hager with World and National Headlines. Nathan.
We know who has been promoting people wearing masks, of course, Dr. Anthony Fauci. And he's saying there's a good chance that if the right things fall into place, like wearing masks, we could have a coronavirus vaccine by the end of this year. The director of the National Institutes of Allergy and Infectious Diseases at the same time tells CNN recent instances of social crowding are very troubling.
In which you see that type of crowding with no masks and people interacting, that's not prudent, and that's inviting a situation that could get out of control.
Fauci says a second wave of COVID-19 infection isn't inevitable if people are prudent. Joe Biden is calling for a federal investigation into the death of George Floyd. He's the black man who died in police custody in Minneapolis after a white officer pinned his neck to the ground with his knee. The presumptive Democratic presidential nominee calls Floyd's death a tragic reminder of an ingrained systemic cycle of injustice. Now, the 4 officers involved in Floyd's arrest Monday were fired yesterday. His death sparked protest in Minneapolis last night. President Trump is meeting at the White House right now with New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. This afternoon, he heads to Cape Canaveral, Florida, for the first manned private rocket launch ever to the International Space Station. 2 NASA astronauts are set for liftoff aboard a SpaceX rocket. 4:33 this afternoon, Wall Street time. Veteran astronaut Bob Behnken says he and his crewmate Doug Hurley are the perfect team.
In addition to, finishing each other's sentences, we can predict, almost by body language what the person's opinion is or what their next action is going to be.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
It's a stock market driver.
Now they're starting.
This is a message from the RNLI and Her Majesty's Coast Guard. Beach lifeguards can't be everywhere this summer, so they can't always protect your family, but you can. So keep an eye on your loved ones. Avoid taking risks in the sea. Don't use inflatables. In an emergency, dial 999 for the Coast Guard. Get more advice at rnli.org/beach2020. Thank you.
Be part of the sports conversation with Sports Talk Radio on TuneIn. Join the discussion around your favorite local teams with sports stations broadcasting in your
The game
area.
will be 185 to 183, and somebody wins, whatever. Football, it's either full go or it's not. You got it's thud. I can practice what they call
Follow
thud.
national storylines and debates with ESPN Radio.
Does the NBA have a hiring problem when it comes to front office jobs in the leagues and a minority hiring issue? Stephen A. chimed in on that today on First Take.
It also resonates with me, Max. You can appreciate this position. One of the candidates was Brian Colangelo. We know what happened. I like Brian, but we know.
And hear what's happening worldwide with international channels like Talk Sport.
Seems as I'm sort of doing my life in reverse at the moment. I was on cricket tours when I was 20 years old, and now I'm 31. I'm out sat at home injured playing PlayStation. So it's a tournament basically where you create your own character.
In your backyard and around the globe. Keep your finger on the pulse of the sports world with TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of active
round the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Wondering what to play next? Want to know what other TuneIn listeners are listening to right now? Head to the trending section under Browse to explore the most popular stations and podcasts on TuneIn today. Millions of listeners like you can't be wrong.
Where do sports, culture, and basketball nostalgia collide? On their podcast, Knuckleheads, NBA veterans Quentin Richardson and Darius Miles sit down with athletes, musicians, and entertainers to get brutally honest, totally unguarded conversations about everything from current events to untold stories from the golden era of sports.
O'Neal. You know that, right? I tried to tip dunk all the free throw line one time.
Search Knuckleheads on TuneIn to listen.
Get your daily dose of NFL shop talk with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Start your morning off right with Around the NFL.
Injured, depleted roster into the playoffs, and I didn't think they belonged in the playoffs.
I think overall, though, it was a great divisional round weekend because you got the first one.
Run into the end zone with the Move the Sticks podcast.
We had a fun little Zoom cocktail hour last night.
Oh, yeah.
What a star-studded affair. Greg, you were there for the earlier part, but it really popped off.
a little later on, we had Zach Goldman.
And dive deep into the sidelines with the Peter King podcast.
On the occasion of his 50th birthday, come down and record a little bit of retrospective on the life and times of Brett Lorenzo Favre.
That sounds like a bestseller.
It sounds like a precursor to a funeral. That's what it is.
I wasn't thinking that.
Explore these and more hard-hitting NFL podcasts right here on TuneIn.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash. The S&P turned negative as tech heavyweights dragged down the index alongside healthcare stocks. The move could be attributed to U.S. tensions with China as the tech sector tends to react strongly to China headline risk. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is little changed. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 0.75%, up 184. And the NASDAQ is down 1.1%, down 106. The 10-year is up 7/30 seconds with a yield of 0.67%. West Texas Intermediate crude off earlier lows is down 4.75% at $32.70 a barrel. COMEX gold's down 0.9% at $17.1240 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.84. The euro's $1.0959, and the British pound $1.2225. Briggs & Stratton, the century-old maker of small engines for lawnmowers and garden equipment that's at risk of going bankrupt, hired restructuring advisors to help rework debt that starts coming due this year. Sources say the company tapped Houlihan Lokey ahead of the June 15th interest payment on unsecured bonds that mature in December. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
We are approaching the summer and then the fall when students return to college campuses around the country, except that this year there's a high likelihood that they will not be doing so, which raises a question of whether parents really want to be paying and students themselves want to be taking out loans to pay colleges when they cannot get the full college experience. Joining us now to discuss this and what the future is for higher education in general is Robert Kelchin, Associate Professor of the Department of Education, Leadership, Management, and Policy at Seton Hall University, as well as Janet Lauren, endowments reporter for Bloomberg News. Robert, I want to start with you. How big of an existential threat is COVID-19 and the likelihood that many campuses will not open in the fall to higher education?
It's a serious risk to many college campuses because students may not pay as much in tuition, and colleges that have students living on campus won't get that incredibly important revenue from room and board.
So, Janet, let's put this into maybe financial perspective a little bit here. A lot of this big universities with multi-billion-dollar endowments, they're likely to be able to weather this pandemic risk better than others. But I'm thinking about the secondary and even smaller colleges and universities. How at risk do you think they are from an economic perspective?
Well, before we get to the second-tier colleges, just don't forget that Harvard also said that they have a $1.2 billion budget deficit over two academic years, and Northwestern also talked about its budget deficit. So it's the biggest colleges with the biggest endowments are not necessarily immune. These are the schools that pretty quickly paid out room and board refunds. And we've also seen that colleges have had to cancel somewhat lucrative summer programs, which help fill their campuses. So that's one step. Most colleges are not going to be immune to anything. And certainly the second-tier colleges, they're having to think about who's going to be coming to fill their classes. As the top-tier colleges, take other kids off the wait list, the second-tier colleges may find that the kids that they thought were coming in the fall may not be there. And certainly tuition revenue is a huge part of most college budgets. Certainly the wealthiest colleges, like Princeton, Amherst College, more than half of their budgets come from endowment investment income. However, most schools are very reliant on tuition to make their budget.
Robert, there's a question here. How much is this going to be a temporary shock for universities, particularly the ones that have more robust endowments and are better weathered or sort of hunkered down to weather this storm? And how much does this shift the whole conversation around higher education, where we've seen incredible inflation of the tuition bills over time? And I mean, this is a lot of people saying maybe we need to rethink this, and some of these colleges don't need to exist.
In the short term, this puts incredible pressure on colleges to hold the line on tuition, even as they're spending more money to get college campuses ready for students in the fall. Will many colleges go out of business from this? The answer is probably not that many. It'll be small private colleges serving a few hundred students, but most public colleges will go on, even if they're hit hard by losses in state funding. And most mid-sized private colleges will find a way through, even though it will be a difficult few years to come.
Janet, we've seen some big universities, Harvard, Brown, MIT, coming to the bond market. How's higher education generally been received in the credit markets, and kind of how's the outlook today for some of these institutions?
Well, these schools are still very highly rated. They have very high demand, and they're taking advantage of low interest rates. And there, chances are the institutions you just named are going to continue to be around for a very long time. So, I think there's still been demand for that debt, considering where their market position is.
Robert, do you think that online education should cost the same amount as the in-person type?
Online education will end up costing about the same amount unless a college can get up to massive scale, because you're still interacting with faculty. Good technology is expensive. You don't have some of the in-person facilities, but the tuition price ends up typically being about the same for good online versus good in-person education.
That's kind of shocking to me, because I would think that the classroom, the amount of people that could potentially be a participant in the online course, the overhead seems like it would be a lot less. Why am I wrong?
Most of the overhead here is people. And if you want interaction between students and professors, you need faculty to do that. And good technology for learning management systems and working with students online is also expensive, although there are returns if you can get large class or large universities doing this, like an Arizona State. But most smaller colleges doing this for 1 or 2 semesters just won't see that economy of scale.
Janet, can any of I'm thinking more about the private colleges and universities, can they expect any support in terms of fiscal support, fiscal stimulus from the government?
Well, we've already seen universities such as, Harvard, Princeton, Stanford saying they were declining, to accept their share of federal stimulus money early on, amid a lot of criticism. I also did a story about the PPP money that some small colleges were not sure if they were allowed to apply for it because of the requirement on workers. And their student workers had been counted, even though, they had all gone home. So, depending on if the smaller colleges do, meet the threshold for employees, they could get some money from the PPP, because they really are small businesses.
Robert Kelchen, thank you so much for joining us. Robert Kelchen, Associate Professor at Department of Education, Leadership, Management, and Policy at Seton Hall University in New Jersey. And Janet Lauren, endowments reporter for Bloomberg News on the phone. Really fascinating discussion there. I kind of agree with you, Lisa. I would think just intuitively there would be a discount for online versus being on campus.
Yeah, I'm going to pray for that. I mean, it sounds like that's not going to be the case. And honestly, it's good to have people paid for what they offer still as a parent. The idea of having a little bit of deflation in that in tuition payments, not the worst thing in the world. I do want to bring you this headline crossing that the U.S. will not certify Hong Kong's autonomy. This basically throws into question whether that region will continue to get special trading status, the sort of first step to decertifying them. Again, Paul, though, the question in my mind is, who will that hurt more, the U.S. or Beijing? the people in Hong Kong.
Yeah, we're coming back to that discussion that we've had prior to the pandemic. It's about the trade wars and who really gets hurt the most, who can weather a disruption in the relationship more, the U.S. or China. Looks like we're about to find out on a little bit different front. For Lisa Bronwitz, I'm Paul Sweeney. You've been listening to Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg.
In addition to Bloomberg Radio, you can catch the latest news and biggest newsmakers on Bloomberg Television. Look for us on DirecTV Channel 353 or check your local listings. Interconnect here. What?
Whoa, just got a Moonpig reminder that it's your birthday Saturday.
Yeah, I set that up.
Oh, do you know what? I forget one time. Okay, I'm in the app.
Oh, the romantic card section.
I'm full of surprises. Now, what rhymes with babe?
How about just uploading a nice pic? No, wait, I'm not ready.
Hey, I love you from every angle. Now for the gifts. Oh, and flowers.
Heartfelt can happen anywhere with moonpig.com. Download the app now.
How do you keep track of all your favorite stations and podcasts? Easy. You add them to your favorites list. Just find the audio you want to bookmark and tap the heart icon. Then, whenever you want to browse your favorites, you'll find everything under the Favorites tab.
Looking for your daily fix of NFL news and analysis?
In that. So we had to blow it up into Super Bowl predictions instead.
Look no further than the Pick 6 podcast, where CBS sports writer Will Brinson gets you up to speed with what's trending in the NFL that day, so that you're always in the know.
Yeah, it's pretty revealing of Brinson's methodology for predictions. When he gets mad at people for predicting good teams are going to win the Super Bowl or good players are going to win major awards. That's how you wind up.
Search Pick 6 on TuneIn to listen.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
He does! Fabry wins it!
To standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
Today at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From New York to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, this is Balance of Power, where the world of politics meets the world of business. I'm David Weston. It is a big day today down at Cape Canaveral, Florida, as they have scheduled the first launch of astronauts from U.S. soil into space for the first time in 9 years now. And it's being done as a joint venture between NASA, a government agency, and SpaceX, Elon Musk's SpaceX, a private company. I talked earlier today with the administrator of NASA, he is Jim Bridenstine, about this relationship and exactly what each party brings to this launch.
We're largely focused on the International Space Station, but we are also the customer for this launch. So as the mission management team goes through the countdown sequence, we're going to have NASA engineers and NASA flight directors that are going to be side by side with the SpaceX engineers and flight directors. And if at any point we feel uncomfortable with the direction that they're going, of course we can halt the launch. But what NASA is trying to do right now, we are trying to create a robust commercial marketplace in low Earth orbit. That's the goal, which means we need SpaceX to go get customers that are not NASA. We want to be a customer, but we want to be one of many customers. So what we're doing is we're giving SpaceX a lot of leash. In fact, we have contracted for them to actually do the launch almost independently. But make no mistake, our engineers and our technicians have been involved in the development of this capability, and our astronauts have been involved in it. So again, we want to be one customer of many. We are helping to grow this commercial marketplace by being a tenant customer initially, but we also want to have numerous providers that are competing against each other on cost and innovation and safety. And when we achieve that, it's going to transform how we do spaceflight. It's going to bring down costs and it's going to increase access.
So you talked about commercialization, which is particularly interesting to our audience, how that works. When it comes to SpaceX launching satellites, it's pretty clear. A bunch of companies as well as governments need satellites up in orbit. What about for astronauts? Is there the same demand, commercial demand? What's the top line, the revenue there?
Yeah, at this point, the history has been that government creates the demand and then government creates the supply. And so what we're doing here is we're trying to change that paradigm. Certainly, we are creating the demand, and we're turning to commercial industry to give us the supply. But again, what we want to see eventually is the demand would come from others as well. And so what are we doing right now? We're using the International Space Station to do things like we're creating human organs in 3D, printing human organs in 3D using adult stem cells. Right now, it's just tissue, but eventually it's going to be full organs. And we can only do that in the microgravity of space. If you try to do it on Earth, the tissue just goes flat. But then, of course, it's not just that. It's also using advanced materials to create artificial retinas for the human eyeball. So somebody who has macular degeneration doesn't have to lose their eyesight. It's advanced materials like fiber optics you can create fiber optics in such a pristine way that you don't have to have repeaters, which drives down the cost for fiber optics, and it closes the business case for manufacturing in space. We're compounding pharmaceuticals in a way that you cannot do in the gravity well of Earth. We're creating immunizations that you cannot create in the gravity well of Earth. So these are all different markets that we are proving out on the International Space Station, knowing that eventually there's going to be a large capital influx, not just for launch, which is what we're doing today, but also for human habitation in space. And that's really the end state that we're seeking to achieve.
Whenever we talk about commerce, we talk about competition, because that drives commerce to a large degree. Talk about two kinds of competition. One is Boeing against SpaceX, because you've got two horses in the race, but one seems to be lagging behind. Do you need Boeing to catch up? And what about Soyuz? Are you still going to be doing business with Soyuz?
So the Boeing and SpaceX paradigm, I'll talk about that first. So remember, SpaceX was doing commercial resupply of the International Space Station, and they were largely doing it with a lot of the same equipment that they're now going to be doing commercial crew with. Boeing did not participate in commercial resupply. So Boeing went straight from nothing to commercial crew. So that's a lot harder of a starting position. And so, yes, they are a little bit behind right now. And of course, it cost us a little more to get them ramped up because of their starting position. That being said, we are committed to having two partners in this future that we envision. But we also believe this is important. There are other companies right now that are stepping up to the plate that want to be part of this. Sierra Nevada Corporation, Blue Origin, which is Jeff Bezos' organization. So there's other partners out there on the horizon for this commercial marketplace eventuality.
And what about Soyuz? Are you still going to work with Soyuz? You've spent $3.5 billion with them over the last 10 years.
That's right. So when we think about the International Space Station, half of it is the United States segment with all of our international partners, and the other half of it is the Russian segment. So if we want to make sure that we keep it crewed with both Americans and Russians, then it will be appropriate for us for Americans to launch on Soyuz rockets and for Russians to launch on commercial crew rockets. Now, that being said, the difference is instead of us going out and buying seats at $90 million a piece, now we're going to be able to do a no exchange of funds trade, which is a very different, it makes it more of a partnership and less of a dependency. So we like the partnership. We want to get ourselves off of the dependency.
Talk about the two astronauts who are scheduled to go up. I mean, you must have some affinity with them. I mean, you are yourself a very accomplished carrier and combat pilot. You must understand some of what they're going through.
Well, I would never suggest that I know what they're going through, but I can tell you for sure that these are the best that America has to offer. Doug Hurley is a Marine Corps test pilot and an amazing individual. Bob Benkin is a flight test engineer from the United States Air Force. And of course, they're both veterans of numerous space shuttle missions. They're both test pilots. Remember what this mission is. This is a test mission. And of course, we almost always have test pilots on test missions. And these are the two right people for this job. And we are very anxious to get them to orbit get them onto the space station, and get them home safely.
This is a historic moment, no matter what, for the reasons we've talked about. But beyond that, it's not lost on anyone that this is in the middle of a pandemic. How important is it for the United States right now to be returning astronauts to space from United States soil when we are fighting this COVID-19?
That's so important. Look, NASA has a long history of doing stunning things in the middle of very difficult times. We go back to the Apollo era. We saw, a war raging in Vietnam and protests in the streets and at the Capitol and at universities. We had civil rights abuses and civil rights protests. And of course, we were in the height of the Cold War. And in the midst of all of that, we were able to send Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin to the surface of the moon. And for that unique moment in time, everybody in the country united, and we all looked up and we dreamed bigger dreams. And because of that moment, there are so many people at NASA that are doing even more amazing work today. We need to create those stunning achievements to inspire the next generation. Yes, we're in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. NASA has been very aggressive in having people work from home. We did that intentionally because we wanted to protect this mission. There is nothing more important for us right now than launching American astronauts on American rockets from American soil, something that we have not done since 2011, the retirement of the space shuttles. So we protected this mission. We're now at the point where we're getting ready to launch, and we can do it. We can do it, and we've done it safely. We've given everybody personal protective equipment. We've made sure that we've got social distancing, that we're dividing up shifts so that we're minimizing contact when working on the vehicle. All of these things put us in a position to have a successful mission. And yes, this is our legacy, and we can do it today just as we did it in the 1960s.
That was Jim Brightenstein. He is the administrator of NASA on the eve of this historic launch down at Cape Canaveral. Coming up here, Disney has big news today as it announces plans to open its theme parks in Florida. We'll bring you that. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
When keeping track.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Thanks to National Lottery players, the Emerald Centre are now providing emergency food supplies and support for people in Bedfordshire like Alan. Thank you. And £600 million of National Lottery funding is on its way to thousands more local projects in England and across the UK during these exceptional times.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen.
Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA Show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in the front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I went up high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Want to relive the glory of college football?
Balls over a man, into the end zone.
Come explore TuneIn's classic game replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship, featuring Clemson and LSU.
There are going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be 1 team hold up the trophy.
10, to the 5, touchdown! Search classic game replays to listen for free.
Looking for your daily fix of NFL news and analysis?
In that. So we had to blow it up and do Super Bowl predictions instead. Because we
Look no further than the Pick Six podcast, where CBS sports writer Will Brinson gets you up to speed with what's trending in the NFL that day, so that you're always in the know.
Yeah, it's pretty revealing of Brince's methodology for predictions. When he gets mad at people for predicting good teams are going to win the Super Bowl or good players are going to win major awards. That's how you wind up.
Search Pick Six on TuneIn to listen.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
Yeah, but it's unique times. I think there's unique circumstances, and we're trying to
standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
The NHL is always on the ice with these awesome hockey podcasts on TuneIn. Get your goal with the Spittin' Chicklets podcast.
Brian Yandel, Keith Yandel, thanks for coming on. What's going on?
Nothing much. Glad to be here. You guys got some nice digs here.
We heard you took Southwest 2-stop flight to get out here.
Yeah, well, just
carve up the ice with NHL at the rink.
The other day I wrote a story. Artemi Panarin, Semyon Varlamov, Sergei Bobrovsky, they all helped arrange for the purchase of N95 masks to benefit hospitals in their respective markets. This is another one of those positive stories you're seeing.
Or create your own power play with Locked On NHL.
All these teams invested future assets to take a run at the Stanley Cup right now. Like, all of those teams would have a real serious gripe, like trading these multiple first-round picks to make a run at a cup. You're right.
Discover these and more NHL podcasts right here on TuneIn. Behind the highlight reels, championship rings, and colossal paychecks, there are sports stories that fuel, deepen, and even challenge our love for the game. For true tales of underdogs, anti-heroes, and game-changing innovators, explore a sports documentary on TuneIn, like Sports Wars, telling the origin stories of classic rivalries, Raise Sports, about the concussion crisis that threatens football's future, and Dunkumentaries, a podcast devoted to the beauty and power of the slam dunk. For these and more, search Sports Documentaries on TuneIn.
With millions of podcasts dropping new episodes all the time, how do you keep up with all your favorites? TuneIn makes it easy. Simply head to the home screen and find your new episode section to see the latest additions.
The government debt.
So, that's a long, complicated discussion. I would say a couple of things that are really important. One is there is something that's really profound about the ability for the governments to actually borrow today. I'm not saying there's an unlimited amount the governments can borrow. They have to be conscious of you could put too much debt on a system, you create a crowding out effect for the corporate sector, households, financials, et cetera. But today, because of the demographic we talk about, the system is actually set up to be a lender. Insurance companies, pension funds actually need the assets and actually need to lend. And what's happened when you drop rates to so low, it's causing people to say, gosh, where do I go to actually be a lender? And so in today's environment, you can actually create some more debt on the system as long as you're creating nominal GDP, which I would argue in the U.S. we will have some improvement, significant improvement in nominal GDP to pay down the debt over time. But I think it's fair to say we shouldn't go too far. But to put a bit more debt on the system, given the circumstances, is actually not as scary as it's been historically. Think about it. When we were back in 06, 07, the households were indebted because of the housing market, the financials were indebted. We're in a better position today. That being said, you've always got to be pragmatic about it. You can't just keep doing it. But we can afford to do a little more debt, certainly to get to the other side of what is a shock to the economic system.
So Rick, that's the fixed income side of your book. Let's go to the equity side, because a lot of people are saying, boy, the equities look like they're pretty high considering what we're really seeing in the economy. Are the equities telling us something meaningful about the recovery?
Well, the first is we can't leave the fixed income side because it's part of why the equities are doing what they're doing. When you move interest rates to zero, then you're basically telling people you would need to find something else to do. And when you can't create income in other ways, you need to find something else to do. And you create this transmission effect that gets into the discount rate on equities. It gets into the alternative assets that equities are. And listen, I think the equity market is too high on a short-term basis, given what the economy is telling you. But part of what I think people have been maybe a bit short-sighted about is you don't buy equities for the next quarter. People talk a lot about next quarter and PE ratio off of this year. If you go over the intermediate term and think about, gosh, we're going to have low interest rates for a long time, and you think about where earnings are going to be over a long period of time, because equities are a long duration, the longest duration asset there is. Equity valuations, when you take equity risk premium and think about where we are versus on a low interest rate, on a low level where companies can borrow and actually buy back their stock if they want to, equities are not high. I mean, I think they can go higher. I mean, near term, do I think they should pull back a little bit? Probably. But, if you're building balance in your portfolio and you're a long-term investor or medium-term investor, to hold equities in the portfolio, versus owning, you're not going to make any money owning the 10-year Treasury note at 68 basis points, 69 basis points. So I do think that equities make sense as long as you're an investor and can be thoughtful about, gosh, I'm not going to look at, could I go down in the next week or so? You could go down a bit, but I think people are underestimating equities for the intermediate to long haul are actually still okay value here.
Okay, you're making me feel better, Rick. Thank you so much. It's always a treat to have you with us. That's Rick Reeder from BlackRock. And coming up next, we're going to get to talk about the Walt Disney Company and reopening some theme parks down in Florida. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, makes innovation happen. NJIT faculty mentored Christoph Camacho when he was a student, helping him co-found a startup and patent a device that uses drone technology for reforestation and to collect valuable data for land management.
I founded Paratrees back in 2016, taking what I learned from my research at NJIT and migrating it to a startup. Our technology is to really enhance land management operations, so we work very closely with land management companies. So we have a drone that performs precision reforestation, and we do storm damage assessment, having access to drones that can collect data so it's much faster. And what is more important, we help them drive management decisions. NJIT has been there every step of the way, going full force with my company.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Tom has been a teacher for over 40 years. One day, I think one of the students had asked the question and he didn't remember the answer. And I also noticed that he was letting his class out earlier than they were supposed to let out. I was really starting to worry.
Levi and I talked about how it would change our lives, but he was there beside me.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
You've always relied on Bloomberg's strong Asian presence.
You didn't mention any particular areas in China. Let me just go to Hong Kong.
And now you need it even more.
Where are we in terms of understanding President Xi?
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
We're starting to see infections in some of the Asian countries.
Tonight at 6 Eastern.
Do you ever get the feeling some people just weren't prepared?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. The Walt Disney Company is making big news today as it announces its plans. It has to be approved, but its plans to reopen theme parks down in Florida. So my company that I have a lot of love for, used to work for, is really making the news. And we're going to turn to my colleague, Emily Chang now, who has the CEO of the Walt Disney Company. Emily?
Thank you, David. Joining us now, Bob Chapek, the CEO of Disney. Bob, thank you so much for joining us. You have just laid out your reopening plan for Disney World to Florida officials starting July 11th, July 15th for Epcot Center. A lot of the same things you're doing in Shanghai: face masks, temperature checks, social distancing. What makes you feel confident in the safety of this plan, and what has been the reaction from officials so far?
Well, we always said we would not open up again until we thought we could do so responsibly. We've got some learnings from Shanghai. We've got some learnings from our own Disney Springs retail and dining area that we opened up just a week ago. And we've been able to make some learnings in terms of how you keep that social distancing. That is the key for us, keeping that 6 feet social distancing, no matter whether people in restaurants, whether on Main Street, or whether they're in attractions. And we're confident that we can do that and open up responsibly.
That said, Universal is planning to open up June 5th. Why a month later?
Well, for us, we feel that this is the right time for us in July. We've got a different situation, frankly, than Universal does because we're much bigger. We have a much more complex business. We've got a different labor situation. And at the same time, we're also going to be implementing a new reservation system for our guests. And it's going to take some time to take the millions of reservations that we've already got on the books and then switch that over to a new reservation system. So we think July is the right time for us.
So let's talk about some of your learnings from Shanghai. You've been open there since May 11th. You've been doing these temperature checks. Are people actually showing up with fevers and getting turned away? Have you gotten to that 30% capacity yet? And when do you plan to go beyond that?
Well, everything has gone extremely well at Shanghai, and I must compliment not only our cast, but I must compliment the guests for their cooperation during the whole thing, because it really takes the chemistry between both groups in order to make this whole thing work with social distancing. And, so for us, the learning is that we've stuck to our limitations that we've placed on ourselves, and it's worked extremely well. We're up to about 20,000 guests now that we take per day, and we're maintaining the social distancing guidelines that the government has placed upon us. And we believe that as those social distancing guidelines are relaxed or somehow changed, that we'll be able to actually grow with it and really please even more guests than we can today.
So give us a rough sense of which resorts will be next and when. I know you've gotten the green light to open downtown Disney in California. What about Hong Kong, Tokyo, Paris, and Disneyland itself?
Well, we've got no announcement that we're ready to make on those other parks. As you know, they all are in areas with different situations in terms of the progress of the COVID-19 pandemic, but also different situations in terms of where the government sort of feels they're at and providing some level of assurances that it's going to be responsible to open up. So we have to take our cues from each local government in each place. We always like to say at Disney that we're really just a citizen of the environments that we are operating in, and we want to be a good citizen. And so we really do follow the lead of the local governments as our cue, and then we overlay what we believe is good common sense from a Disney standpoint, and that determines our opening date.
Bob, the Walt Disney Company prides itself in execution, often flawless execution of plans. It also, though, is a planner. You make long-term strategic plans. As you look at the world, in this post-pandemic world, has it changed your emphasis on different of your assets? You have a wonderful group of assets, but many of them were based on people getting together, whether it's sporting events or it's movie theaters or it's theme parks or it's cruise ships.
I think over time, some of the fears that people have, and they're warranted fears about getting together in big groups, will eventually dissipate. But it's going to dissipate on the function of trust. And there's not many companies in the world that are trusted as much as the Walt Disney Company. But it's a trust that we will not in any way violate. And so Disney opens up a little later than others. We open up with not as many people inside our parks, but we do that on purpose because we want to build that trust in this new environment. It's a new normal, and then take it from there. So baby steps every step of the way.
No question about it. At the same time, as you allocate capital, and goodness knows your theme parks, your cruise ships have a lot of capital going against them, will you make some adjustments, almost a hedge against the future, in case it doesn't come back as robust as you might expect, into other things, such as, for example, your streaming business, which is doing very well?
Well, we at Disney are fortunate not just to have a broad base of businesses to fall back upon, but a broad group of properties, both in the sports area, as well as in movies, as well as theme parks, as well as in cruise ships, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we feel that we're very fortunate to sort of shift things around. In terms of capital allocation, everything that we can see long-term from our guest surveys tell us that Disney parks will be back. Our guests will be back. People are really hesitant to cancel their reservations that already exist. So we think we're going to have enough demand over time. Sure, there's going to be some bumps along the way as we have limited capacity, but we've got enough horses in the game, if you will, that we can go ahead and shift things around in the meantime, but be in a really good position, a really strong position, or emerge even stronger long-term than we are right now.
Last quick question, Bob. You're planning to open Mulan in theaters July 24th. How do you expect that to go to plan? And how do you expect it to be received in China?
Well, we're bullish on Mulan and the film in itself, but also our ability to get it out in the marketplace at a time where, frankly, there's going to be a lot of people that are starved for entertainment and to be able to get out of the house. Now, it's up to our exhibitors to figure out exactly how they're going to plan that social distancing in order to accommodate that. But we're bullish about our date of July 24th, and we're really optimistic of that. Even that exhibition business is going to come back strong.
Bob Chapek, thank you so very much, and Emily Chang as well. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. stocks are mixed amid rising tensions with China. Tech stocks are falling. The Dow is up 256 points, S&P up 7, but the tech-heavy NASDAQ is down 83 points. There is some good news in the housing market. Applications for new home loans rose last week to the highest level since January. It was up nearly 9% despite surging unemployment. Walmart is teaming up with the online used clothing site ThredUp to offer nearly 750,000 items of used women and children's clothing and accessories on its website. If you ever thought about buying a Tesla, this could be the time. After sales took a huge hit in April, falling by 2/3, Tesla is now lowering the price of its Model S sedan and the Model X SUV. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Market upheavals.
The narrative is driven by uncertainty about the virus.
Political reversals.
It's not clear that some of the Republicans up on the Hill are agreed with the Republican White House.
Economic shifts.
The macro clearly being driven by the coronavirus outbreak.
Everything seems to be in motion.
Will it also mean a global recession in your view now?
But here, you're on solid ground.
Looking forward to guiding you through all of this.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. It's time now for First Word News. For that, we go to Mark Crumpton.
David, thank you. The nation's top infectious disease expert says he's hopeful there will be a vaccine for COVID-19 available by the end of the year. Dr. Anthony Fauci also tells CNN recent instances of social crowding, such as a pool party in Missouri, are, in his words, very troubling. He says U.S. testing capability is getting better and that a second wave of coronavirus is not inevitable if people are prudent. The European Commission has unveiled an unprecedented $823 billion stimulus plan. It's aimed at fighting the worst recession in living memory, and it will underwrite Italy's membership in the bloc. The government in Rome would get the single largest chunk of emergency grants and low-interest loans. The package would be funded by joint debt issuance. That would be a significant step toward closer financial integration. The United States has certified that Hong Kong is no longer politically autonomous from China. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says it's a move that could have far-reaching consequences on the special trading status the former British colony has with the United States. China is preparing to pass a new security law giving Beijing more control over Hong Kong. That has sparked new protests. It is a defining moment for Elon Musk and SpaceX. If all goes well, a SpaceX rocket will launch this afternoon from Cape Canaveral carrying 2 NASA astronauts. It will be the first time humans have ever ridden into space aboard a commercial spacecraft. The capsule will dock with the International Space Station 19 hours later. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. David?
Thanks so much, Mark. So, like much of the rest of the country, the securities industry is trying to figure out how to bring its workers back from home, how the safest and best way to do that is. And so the Securities Industry and Financial Markets Association has really polled its members and said, what are the best practices as you're planning to come back? And they presented a paper now exactly giving some outlines of what to do. We welcome now the CEO of SIFMA. He is Ken Benson. So, Ken, thanks so much for being here, because this is what we're all interested in. We just heard about Walt Disney Company, what they're going to try to do with its theme parks. Give us an outline of exactly what the securities industry thinks it can do in bringing back employees.
Yeah, good afternoon, David, and thank you for having me on. SIFMA, we've been in our business continuity planning mode really since January, and worked with the industry to go to working remote, where firms reported up to 95% of their staff were working either in backup sites or from home. And now, over the last couple of weeks, the shift has been when it's time, how can firms begin to return to office in some normal fashion? Now, some firms have reported that they've had some smaller share of staff coming in, but as they start to think in larger terms, what are the considerations that they're going to need to take to work with? And so we surveyed 60 member firms along with a number of industry utilities to come up with this list of considerations that we put together. And they're really broken into areas affecting staff safety, legal liability concerns, employee sentiment and privacy, questions around screening and testing, HR, and of course what the local and federal government directives are, and healthcare advisories. And we broke it down into planning, implementation, legal compliance, communications, and human resources. And of course, every firm will have to tailor their own plan. But what we're trying is the firms collectively coming together and saying, what is everyone thinking about, and how they're going to do this when they feel it's time to start bringing people back in.
Well, and when you talk about start bringing people back in, one of the things you talk about is really doing some prioritizing of who comes in and not bringing everybody back in at once. Interestingly, traders are sort of at the top of your list, but you also say you should be 6 feet apart. The trading floors I've been on don't have 6 feet between the desks. Is that doable?
Well, firms are certainly working on that now. The whole question around PPE and spacing and social distancing, firms have been spending a lot of time on figuring out how they can do it. You're right in terms of who are the first people that firms will hope to bring back in will be in the sales and trading and front office, followed by firm funding and payments. And, things like IT support, compliance, operations will probably be in the later phases along with advisory. But you're right, firms and we go into this, a whole host of logistical and office planning concerns that firms have to take into consideration as they bring back in a mass, as well as things like split shifts, how you deal with getting people up in elevators. And of course, we can't underestimate the whole issues around transportation and how people get in many cases in the New York area, obviously, using mass transit.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that stood out for me was the use of benchmarks or rules, because a lot of people are saying, just let me plan. How can I know what's going on? One of the things you suggest is a little bit like what Governor Cuomo has done to some extent with his benchmarks here in New York State, saying, set out some rules and say, when we get to these kinds of numbers, then we'll go to the next phase, but not until then.
Yeah, I think firms, again, every firm will do it what meets their most immediate needs, and many firms are thinking of different ideas, in terms of how will they, what will the offices look like in the future. A lot of firms report that they're not going to rush back in even through the end of the year, and certainly not before there's a vaccine. And further, firms are thinking, longer term policies of potentially disaggregating staff, and in many cases, staff that may work remotely on a more longer term basis, possibly permanent basis. And of course that raises a whole host of issues around regulation and compliance, where we've been engaged with our regulators on if we have a quote unquote new normal or whatever you want to call it, how do we make sure that we're fit within the rule set, or the rule set fits with that new sort of business model.
Yeah, Ken, as you say, your industry to some extent has already had to adapt to working from home one way or the other. Do you have any sense from your members, when they are free to come back, how many people will come back as opposed to how many people will remain at home?
Well, I think in the initial stages, we're starting to see, the industry largely went to almost 95% work from home, and many are still in that mode today. But we are starting to see, people starting to come back in, particularly in the sales and trading area, in the front office area. But it's still, still at least at 75%, I would say, for most firms as they report to us. Many firms report to us that they're not likely to get back to below 50% before the end of the year. Now, again, everything is fluid, and that could change up or down based upon the facts on the ground in terms of the vaccine, testing capabilities, and the like. But that's sort of the what you hear on average that firms are thinking about. But again, I've talked to some executives who have said, there are certain people that we found are just as productive working remotely, and for whatever reason may choose to work remotely, and we may endorse that on a permanent basis going forward. Now, what level that is, we don't know at this point in time. So I do think there will be some long-term structural change, even as people are brought back into the office.
Okay, Ken, thank you very much. It's very helpful, very informative. That's Ken Benson. He is CEO.
Yeah, thanks, David. Always good to
Coming
chat.
up here, we are going to talk with the ILO head. He is Guy Ryder, about the plight of workers around the world in this global recession. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
This probably wasn't what you expected.
Tonight, it's a Lotto double rollover. Don't miss out. Play your numbers online or on the app today. Lotto from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Life isn't always easy at the moment. We can feel frustrated, miss loved ones, or get anxious. But there are simple things we can all do to look after our mental well-being at this time. Every Mind Matters will get you started with personalised tips and advice from the NHS. Whether it's dealing with stress, techniques to help you relax, or simple tips for better sleep, we'll help you find what's right for you. Search Every Mind Matters today.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games.
Bergeron, he scores!
With game replay on TuneIn, you can listen to every power play, slap shot, and goal of the 2019-2020 season so far.
Suter to Cunningham to Fiala, he scores!
And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and and live sporting events.
He does! Fabry wins it!
To standout stations and podcasts, stay in touch with TuneIn.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
Round the Bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks, Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one, not only.
Catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
While he was gone, Al had some kind of vote to make him the managing. You remember he used to come up all the time in the Raiders game that he was the managing general partner. By the way, don't forget, there was a lot going on in Munich. But you know how tired that man was to come back and find out that Al Davis had strong-armed his team from him while he was gone?
Search The Right Time with Bomani Jones to listen.
Did you know that with TuneIn's local radio feature, you can stream live FM and AM stations broadcasting in your area? Discover local news, talk, and music stations. Navigate to the local radio section under Browse to listen locally on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races.
In any case, are highly vulnerable. The informal economy in much of the world, but also in sectors like hotel, catering, retail, wholesale, strong representation of women, and these are the areas which have been decimated by the economic and social impact of the pandemic. So it's disadvantage on top of disadvantage.
So you're warning also of a dire second quarter of 2020. How bad could it be in terms of full-time jobs and working hours lost?
Yeah, we're maintaining the estimation that we previously made that the overall job loss around the world for the second quarter is the equivalent of 305 million full-time jobs compared to the pre-pandemic quarter, the end of 2019. 305 million. And to give you the comparator, the figure for the financial crisis, which I keep harking back to, I know, that was 22, 23 million. So we're in different territory. The question, I think, is how much is going to bounce back in a sort of a V-shaped recovery when people start unlocking, and what will be permanently lost jobs and permanently defunct enterprises. And I don't think we're at the stage where we know the answer to that question, but I think it will become relatively soon apparent.
Because we are already seeing economies start to reopen, then while we're going through this process, how important will testing and tracing be for the job market?
Yeah, we've had a look at the relationship between testing and tracing, and of course, from a health perspective, we know that testing and tracing is a good idea. But what we see is that there is a very strong association between high levels of testing and tracing and more benign labour market outcomes. So where testing and tracing has been intense, job losses have been less, and that's because we think, firstly, if you're testing and tracing, you don't have to rely on closures to such an extent. Testing and tracing gives confidence to consumers, to investors, to employers. And when you do start to open up your enterprise, your workplace, being able to rely on the evidence of testing and tracing really makes the job easier and quicker. So there are many good reasons why, from a purely labor point of view, this is a good idea. It's money well spent. Yup, there's a cost involved, but the benefits from that investment look like a good return to us.
So as we head towards that direction, how do you channel the funds and the aid that you need in order to really boost the economies worldwide and the job markets to some productive and decent sectors of the labor market?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen, very, very substantial injections of fiscal and monetary sort of stimuli into our economies. I think what is a little worrying is that despite the positive effects that are generated by that, this is being done country by country. There is very little international flow over from one country to the next. Testing's a great example. Testing and tracing needs to be boosted in the developing world, in sub-Saharan Africa and elsewhere. They don't have the financial nor the technical means to make this investment. It's just one example, and I can point to others where we do need this international dimension in the response. Global challenge, global response. We haven't really quite got it at the moment.
And that may be even harder to come given the ongoing U.S.-China trade tension. So if we're talking about the COVID-19 pandemic really affecting specific sectors of the job markets, whether it's hospitality or travel, do you envision other sectors that could be more badly affected given the rising tensions of trade protectionism as well?
Yeah, certainly the tensions you refer to do not help when we want to try and construct an international common purpose response, because there isn't the appetite for that type of cooperation out there. But on the more specific questions, I mean, we're hearing a lot now about the new normal in the global economy, deglobalization, restructuring in the light of the pandemic. It's very difficult to know what that is actually going to work out and mean. Look at global supply chains, for example. Are we going to see a radical shortening, simplification, resilience building in global supply chains? It seems like a possible policy option. But that's going to also have, on top of the direct effects of the pandemic, further secondary effects which could complicate the story even further.
Guy Ryder, Director General of the International Labour Organization, thank you very much for your time. Sending it back to you, David.
Thank you so much, Sherry. Coming up here, we're going to talk with a Kentucky lawmaker who's charged with trying to figure out what China did about the pandemic. He is Andy Barr, Republican of Kentucky. That's next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
In these times of loss and crisis, the people you trust to ask the questions you need answered become even more vital.
Should the president, though, impose the Defense Production Act?
Carol Masser and Jason Kelly.
Help us understand what we know so far.
Bloomberg Business Week.
They are on the front line of the impact of the coronavirus.
Weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
The average time a resume spends on an HR manager's desk is 7 seconds, and most of them are tossed aside. Now imagine if one of those resumes belonged to Yasmin, who was
living in a shelter, juggling 3 jobs. I had to be resilient. That's something that you can't teach.
We rely so much on a resume, yet it could never tell the full story of someone who
had to be independent and take initiative. And that's how I handle every project I get.
Discover new ways to develop great talent at gradsoflife.org. Brought to you by Grads of Life and the Ad Council.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving. not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
So China continues to crack down on Hong Kong, even as President Trump says that China really hasn't been straight with us about the origins of the coronavirus. Congress has created a task force to look into that very subject, and we welcome now somebody who's been assigned to that task force. He is Republican Congressman Andy Barr of the state of Kentucky. So, Congressman, thank you so much for being with us. Let's start with the basics. What do you think we don't know right now about what happened with China and this virus?
Well, David, great to be with you. And yes, this is a very important task force to investigate not only China's role in the origins of the coronavirus, but the COVID-19 virus and their cover-up and their disinformation campaign that allowed the virus to spread globally. But also the clear and present efforts of China to displace the United States as the world's superpower, and the serious risks that the Chinese Communist Party poses not only to the United States but to the global community, given some of the malign conduct that they're engaged in. Obviously, what you're seeing in Hong Kong is the most recent abuse that we want to confront and address. But there's a whole range of issues from their aspirations with their military to their violation of human rights, to the economic warfare that they're engaged in with Belt and Road Initiative, and a whole range of other concerns that we have.
The Chinese government has shown itself pretty effective at controlling information within China. So if there are things that you need to know, whether it's about the virus or about other issues, how do you hope to get information they don't want you to have?
Well, that's one of the problems, is that and one of the aspects of the cover-up that we want to examine, the fact that China underreported their initial cases back in December, the fact that they lied about no human-to-human transmission and influenced the World Health Organization to repeat that lie, the cover-up by censoring whistleblowers like Dr. Li Wenliang, who was a doctor in Wuhan who sounded the alarm but ultimately died of the disease. The bureaucracy in Beijing silenced many other whistleblowers by cracking down on social media reports of a very dangerous and highly contagious pneumonia-like virus that was spreading to the hospitals there. That was valuable time that the world lost. And in the process, when the first reports came out about this and spread throughout the international community, many non-governmental organizations, faith-based organizations, the CDC in the United States offered to come in and help contain the contagion, and they were denied access. And that cover-up enabled the spread of the disease. And so, China, the Chinese Communist Party and their actions, they put the whole world at risk, not just health, but the economy. And we need to hold China accountable for that.
So that's the issue, isn't it? Holding it accountable, because certainly it would be nice to know a lot more of these things. But what can be done about it? It's not like we haven't imposed sanctions against China already. We're talking about further sanctions right now, like delisting some companies, changing their trade status, given what's going on in Hong Kong. Have we done anything yet, the United States, that has actually changed Chinese government behavior?
Well, sanctions, you mentioned, is very important. It's an important tool, and we certainly have not utilized the full range of opportunities that we have in terms of economic sanctions to discourage this kind of malign activity. But there are a number of recommendations that we will be presenting and will be considering. As you mentioned and alluded to, the Senate recently passed a bill that would preclude Chinese companies from issuing securities on U.S. stock exchanges if those companies and the auditors of those companies are not subject to review by the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board. It's really just leveling the playing field that investors should be entitled to the audit work papers related to a company's operations in China, just as they are.
If I could just interrupt you there for a second, Congressman, do you think? Sure. Excuse me, Congressman, do you think that will pass the House? Because as you say, it's passed the Senate. You're in the House. Do you think it's going to pass the House?
we're certainly going to be recommending a similar bill. We may be recommending something that goes further than that legislation. But there are more tools and there's more recommendations that we will be proposing. I think I recently spoke to the chairman of the Export-Import Bank. China has a number of export credit agencies that it uses to further its colonialism through the Belt and Road Initiative. We think we can reimagine and reform the Export-Import Bank to better counter Chinese aggression across the world. In addition, the United States can better utilize our role in the international financial institutions, in the IMF and the World Bank, to counter some of the economic warfare that China is engaged in.
Congressman, we're going to have to leave it there. It's really good. A lot to cover. Please come back. That's Andy Barr, Republican Congressman from Kentucky. And this is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. Here's a quandary. Your yacht awaits at the harbor, but how can you safely reach it without risking exposure to all the germ-ridden masses? Global aviation company VistaJet has a solution. They're now providing high flyers with freshly sanitized jets, cars, and VIP lounges to whisk clients to Malta, where your fully stocked yacht will await. In Copenhagen, Noma, 4 times dubbed world's best restaurant, is now a cheeseburger joint. Best part of that, a Noma burger costs less than $20 US instead of the usual $400 tasting menu. Chef Rene Redzepi says the aim is to get locals comfortable with the idea of going out again. Redzepi promises a high-quality burger with the best meats, potato buns made fresh every morning, and the meat ground 3 times a day from grass-fed beef. Visit BloombergPursuits.com for more. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio. There are times when you have to go it alone, but these should not be those times.
With a medical crisis, can any other central bank execute?
When things move this quick, do things break?
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrow, and Lisa Abramowitz.
The range of outcomes is so wide.
Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern.
Walk me through the dynamics that are going to shape the euro.
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, BloombergRadio.com, and now watch us on Bloomberg Television.
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From
Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. It is a mixed Wednesday with the Dow, the S&P both higher. NASDAQ is trading lower. Investors shying away from high-flying technology names in favor of equities most beaten down by the coronavirus pandemic. Rising tensions with China are also adding to pressure on multinational companies. So here's where we stand. Right now, we do have the Dow Jones Industrial Average up 257 points. That is a gain of 1%. The S&P 500 index up 11, a gain of 0.4%, while NASDAQ is down 46 points, a drop now of 0.7%. 10-year up 12.30 seconds, yield 0.65%. Gold is down 0.1%, 17.08 the ounce, while West Texas Intermediate crude retreating 3.2%, $33.27 a barrel. Goldman Sachs President John Waldron says the global economy could be in for a bumpy ride as lockdowns tied to the COVID-19 pandemic begin to ease, especially if governments start to pull back on stimulus programs. Positive today on data today on housing. The Mortgage Bankers Association reports its home purchase index advanced for the sixth straight week. The signed mortgage rates near record lows could provide a boost as the economy reopens. Yesterday, we got data showing new home sales edged higher in April. 102 on Wall Street. That means it is time now for the Market Drivers Report with a focus on American depository receipts. And here's Dave Wilson.
Thanks, Charlie. ADRs are rising more than U.S. shares. The S&P ADR index is up about 0.8%, and the S&P 500 is higher by 0.3%. France's Renault has climbed 18% in U.S. trading. The automaker introduced a plan to cooperate more closely with two Japanese affiliates, Nissan Motor and Mitsubishi Motors, in an effort to cut costs. Nissan's ADRs have gained 10%. National Australia Bank has risen 9.7%. The lender more than doubled a share sale to individual stockholders in response to demand. National Australia is also selling shares to institutional investors to raise capital. Germany's Infineon Technologies has slipped 2.2%. The chip maker sold more than $1.1 billion of shares to help pay for a takeover of U.S.-based Cypress Semiconductor. The $8.7 billion purchase was completed last month. And Switzerland's Lonza Group has fallen 4.4%. The chemical and biotechnology company's ADRs are lower, along with shares of U.S. developers of coronavirus vaccines. Now, Lonza has a deal to work with the developer Moderna, which has lost 10%, Charlie.
All right, we thank you very much. Dave Wilson keeping track of those American depository receipts. Again, recapping equities trading mix with the S&P up 8, a gain of 0.3%. Crude dropping 3%, 33.32 a barrel. Gold down 0.1%, 17.08 the ounce. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Balance of Power.
Everybody in the world has one common enemy, and that's to win the war against this virus.
The first thing you do is listen to the medical professionals.
Those people that lost their pay, we want to see that pay continued.
Where the world of politics meets the world of business.
Our priority is the health and well-being and the lives of the American people.
We want to make sure that we are continuing to support our hospitals.
We've unleashed our most potent weapon of all, the courage of the American people.
Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
NASA prepares the first launch of astronauts into space from the United States in almost 10 years. Phase 4 of possible government support seems to be going nowhere, at least anytime soon. And riot police apparently shut down the massive protest planned for Hong Kong. From New York, welcome to the second hour of Bloomberg Balance of Power. I'm David Weston. Hong Kong dissidents planned a massive march in Hong Kong today, but they were faced with a formidable array of armed police and were forced to spread out around the city as police arrested over 300. Here for an assessment of the tensions in Hong Kong is M. Taylor Fravel. He is director of the MIT Securities Studies Program. So welcome. It's great to have you with us. Give us your sense. Did basically China win this one today?
I don't think China won this one today. I mean, the protests have been going on for a very long period of time, and this is just one battle in what is a much longer war in Hong Kong for greater independence from China.
But was the response from the police, from the authorities, much more forceful than we've seen in the past? Because they were trying to get to LegCo, is that the way it's pronounced, for the Legislative Council? And they didn't get anywhere near it, right?
No, but there have been, I mean, these protests have literally been going on for almost a year, right? And so today, yes, perhaps the protesters didn't get to where they wanted to go, but in some ways, because you and I are talking about it, I think the protest still had an effect, right? I mean, it's very clear that the people of Hong Kong are upset with the new legislation that's proposed in Beijing, and they're taking to the streets again, even though the virus situation in Hong Kong perhaps is not fully eased. And that, to me, I think, is almost more important than sort of what happened in sort of today's round, right? I mean, it's round after round after round.
But does Beijing care about whether the people in Hong Kong are upset? I mean, what real effect does it have on the vital interests of China itself?
Well, I mean, for Beijing, right, they view Hong Kong and the protests over the last year through the lens of sovereignty, right? Mm-hmm. And you know, when Britain reverted to Hong Kong when Britain and China negotiated Hong Kong's reversion, which took place in 1997, right, it was under this rubric of one country, two systems. And the one country was China, therefore Hong Kong was a part of China, but there'd be two systems of governance. And within that, Hong Kong would enjoy a substantial amount of autonomy. And the protests that have been happening in the last year are sort of responding to efforts by Beijing basically to assert greater control over events inside Hong Kong and kind of squeezing that autonomy. And so from Beijing's perspective, they are worried, in my assessment, they over-exaggerate the threat of sort of any kind of true independence movement in Hong Kong, or the fact it might secede from the mainland. But the symbology here is important, and clearly the people of Hong Kong are kind of standing up to China, and that, of course, kind of has implications for other sovereignty disputes involving China, including Taiwan. It also has implications for domestic politics in China.
What is left at this point in your assessment of the two systems, part of the one country, two systems? Some of the United States say, look, it's basically gone. But is that an exaggeration?
I think that overstates the situation, but clearly China has, on one level, right, the national security level, much more forcefully asserted itself. It hasn't moved to sort of take down everything else that makes Hong Kong what it is today and what makes its system so different from that in the mainland, but it certainly is adding sort of an extra layer of scrutiny, an extra layer of pressure. Also, it sort of has been backsliding on efforts to sort of allow the people of Hong Kong greater autonomy in how they choose their chief executive. And so I think some thought that over the course of time, sort of Hong Kong's autonomy would grow under ways that were outlined in the agreement that led to Hong Kong's reversion to the mainland, and those basically have now stopped. And so China is sort of saying, look, Hong Kong, you can have some autonomy, but you can't have maybe what you think you're going to have, and we, Beijing, are going to have the final say on how the territory is governed, so that it does not impinge upon how the party in Beijing views China's sovereignty.
It's not just the people in Hong Kong who are upset about the developments. We have a fair number of people in Washington, both Republicans and Democrats, I should say, who are also expressing some genuine concern, including today with Secretary Pompeo saying he will not certify that Hong Kong is autonomous, which, as I understand it, puts in question its trade treatment by the United States. Does that put pressure on Beijing? It feels to me like it hurts Hong Kong more than it does Beijing.
I think ultimately it will hurt Hong Kong more than it hurts Beijing, especially because Beijing views this through the lens of sovereignty much more than through the lens of finance and economics. So think back 20 or 30 years ago, right? Hong Kong was Greater China's financial center, right? It was sort of the engine of China's coastal economy. It was the entrepot. It played an enormous role in China's opening and reform. But now China's much wealthier. It's much stronger. And then, many people in China talk about how they'd like to see Shanghai play the role that Hong Kong once played before. And so if this pushes more companies into China, into Shanghai, I don't think Beijing would necessarily view that as a negative. Of course, some businesses may choose to go elsewhere in Asia, and I think here Singapore would be the greatest beneficiary in that regard.
Was this in some senses inevitable that would happen, or is timing something important here while the world is consumed with the pandemic? Does that give President Xi and Beijing an opportunity?
I don't think it does. My view is that the situation in Hong Kong has been deteriorating for the last 6 years or so. In the last 12 months, right, with the protests that we talked about at the start of the segment, it's been quite intense. And from Beijing's perspective, the government in Hong Kong has been unable, right, to basically bring those protests to an end and return stability to the territory. And so I think many of us who watched the situation in Hong Kong thought that China would do something, and they would probably do something this spring, especially when sort of the coronavirus situation began to ease. I'm not sure everyone, and myself included, necessarily predicted the national security law would be the form that the action would take, but that China is taking action to defend what it believes as its interest in Hong Kong, I don't think should be surprising, and I don't think it's an effort to take advantage of sort of the world's distraction. Moreover, if you look at U.S.-China relations today, never before has the U.S. been more focused on China than in the last 4 months, right? And so if China is being opportunistic and thinks the U.S. is distracted, I don't know how they can come to that conclusion. Yeah. I mean, we're talking about China all day, all the time, and what it means for the United States. So I just think that's not a compelling explanation.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say I don't think we're going to stop talking about China for some long time to come. We're still not done with the National People's Congress, right? So thank you so very much. It's really great to have you with us today. That is MIT's M. Taylor Fravel. Coming up, will the U.S. economy help or hurt Republicans in the November elections? We're going to talk with Congressman Don Beyer of Virginia on the prospects for a fourth wave of stimulus coming from Congress. That's going to be coming up next. We are on Balance of Power, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
What began in China has expanded worldwide.
Is it China that's going to lead that consumer recovery?
What have we learned?
I'm curious as to what you're monitoring most closely in the news flow.
What can we predict?
Are you seeing a time when you can expect recovery in global travel?
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
Do people realize that those numbers are going to get a lot worse?
Tonight at 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Sweet strawberry icing. You're in Goodwill, and just past that vintage denim jacket you spot miniature donut earrings. You lean in. Ah, that's the scent of shopping success. Because at Goodwill, every item you buy funds local job training and more. So bring home those donut earrings and bring home so much good to your community. Goodwill. Bring good home. Brought to you by Goodwill and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
At Bloomberg, we know a lot of...
This is a message from the government. There is new guidance to help businesses and employees who cannot work from home be COVID-19 secure at work. The advice will help you conduct a risk assessment, put social distancing measures in place, improve hygiene and cleaning in the workplace, and look after the well-being of your employees. Every workplace is different. Use the guidance to make your business COVID-19 secure. Access the support you need at gov.uk/working safely. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
For more than 20 years, Asda supported our communities. We've raised over £23 million for Fair Share and the Trussell Trust. And recently, we've donated supplies to frontline NHS workers and carers. We've always been proud to serve those around us. Visit asda.com/creating change for better. Asda, we're all in this together.
At NatWest, we're putting our money where your business is. We've set aside £5 billion of working capital funding for our customers and have already lent over $3 billion to businesses like yours. So if you bank with NatWest and COVID-19 has affected your business, remember, every one of us is here to support you. Search NatWest business coronavirus.
Figures for RBS Group. Security may be required. Over 18s only. Subject to status. Business use only.
Thanks to National Lottery players, South Denbighshire Community Partnership are now delivering Hot Wheels to elderly people in the community like Bob and Sarah.
Thank you.
And £600 million of National Lottery funding is on its way to thousands more local projects across the UK during these exceptional times.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen.
Helen is dreaming of fighting a flock of 40-foot flamingos. But in reality, she's helping fight COVID-19 in her sleep. Like thousands of others, she's joined the Dream Team. By using the Dream Lab app, they're helping scientists speed up the search for potential treatments. I'll fight you. Keep fighting, Helen. Search Vodafone Dream Lab and join the Dream Team tonight.
Dream Lab app is owned by Vodafone Foundation, an independent charity. Registration number 1089625. Full terms at vodafone.co.uk/dreamlab.
Be part of the sports conversation with Sports Talk Radio on TuneIn. Join the discussion around your favorite local teams with sports stations broadcasting in your area.
The game will be 185 to 183 and somebody wins, whatever. Football, it's either full go or it's not. You got like, it's thud. I can practice what they call
Follow
thud.
national storylines and debates with ESPN Radio.
Does the NBA have a hiring problem when it comes to front office jobs in the leagues and a minority hiring issue? Stephen A. chimed in on that today on First Take.
It also resonates with me, Max. You can appreciate this position. One of the candidates was Brian Colangelo. We know what happened. I like Brian, but we know.
And hear what's happening worldwide with international channels like Talk Sport.
Seems as I'm sort of doing my life in reverse at the moment. I was on cricket tours when I was 20 years old, and now I'm 31. I'm sat at home injured playing PlayStation. So it's a tournament basically where you create your own character.
In your backyard and around the globe. Keep your finger on the pulse of the sports world with TuneIn.
A day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Stocks continue to trade mixed. Investors shying away from high-flying technology shares in favor of equities, most beaten down by the coronavirus pandemic. Right now, we have got the S&P up 9 at 3,001, a gain of 0.3%. The Dow is up 238, up by 1%. It is a down day for NASDAQ, falling 51 points, down about 0.6%. 10-year up 730 seconds, the yield now 0.67%. Gold lower, little change, down less than 0.1%, down 40 cents the ounce at $17.10. And crude oil, West Texas Intermediate, down 3.4%, $33.19 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much, Charlie Pellet. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio. I'm David Weston. The stock market may be coming back, but the economic numbers, including record unemployment, don't show much sign of recovery, at least not yet, leaving Congress to decide whether it needs to enact yet another round of fiscal stimulus, and if so, how soon. We welcome now Don Beyer. He's Democratic Congressman from Northern Virginia. He's Vice Chair of the Joint Economic Committee. So, Congressman, it's always good to have you on. Give us a sense of where this so-called fourth round that the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, proposed a couple weeks ago, where does it stand?
David, I think it's in danger right now. It's a good bill coming out of the House, the so-called HEROES Act. It does almost $1 trillion for state and local governments, which is essential because so many of them were taking really serious hits. And these are the folks who pay the teachers, the firefighters, police, child protective service, even nurses and doctors. But we're also really concerned when we look at 40 million people unemployed. Right now, the unemployment insurance is going to run out at the end of the summer. And what do we do? Because, we should start to turn the corner soon. And maybe we'll be adding a million people here and 500,000 there. But that's still tens of millions of people with no income. And the human suffering is going to be astounding.
What we hear from at least some Republicans is there's not that big a rush. We should wait and see what the effect is of what you've already done, which is, let's be honest, substantial, what the Congress has done already. Where is the urgency? And if it is urgent, why don't our lawmakers feel it's urgent?
Well, I think it is urgent. We're seeing right now that the original CARES Act that we passed a month ago, even now, only maybe half of the money has made it. to the businesses, to the people. There are folks, that direct check that was sent out, there's some won't get it until September. So if we want to think about July, August, September, we need to be acting right now. So the bureaucracy doesn't work instantaneously.
What do you need?
We need to be thinking ahead.
So what do you need to get it moving as a practical matter, legislatively?
Legislatively, right now, we sent a very good bill to the Senate, and now it's going to be the conversations among Nancy Pelosi, Steve Mnuchin at Treasury, Mitch McConnell, maybe Chuck Schumer. They're going to have to come together on it. It's something that the Republicans in the White House can live with, but that definitely makes a difference in the lives of our businesses and of our people. We're seeing right now that maybe I think the number is 100,000 small businesses have already closed permanently. My Congressman Earl Blumenauer from Oregon has a bill on restaurants that, unless we pass, is predicted that 400 over 500,000 restaurants will close by the end of the year, most of them permanently. We want to make sure that when people are ready to, the economy is ready to put people back to work, that the businesses that hire them still exist.
Give us a sense of Northern Virginia, where you live, and you are a businessman yourself. I'm not sure I'd call you a small businessman, but you have quite a substantial business you built there. What's the situation with small businesses, medium-sized businesses in Northern Virginia?
We're doing better than many, only because we have so many federal employees who are still getting paid, and a lot of people in the military industrial base, the Lockheed Martins and the General Dynamics. Who again that's moving forward, but it's the folks that have direct service, the restaurants, the barbershops, things like that are really getting hammered, and we're doing our best. I mean, everybody I know is trying to order dinner a couple nights a week to make sure the restaurants can stay in business. But and almost we've been really coaching people through the PPP and the small business loans. Because if they take advantage of those loans, it certainly helps them get through.
Where is Virginia?
I think Virginia will come back faster than a Las Vegas, for example.
Well, I was going to ask that. Where is Virginia on the process of reopening? We have all 50 states having moved to some extent, but varying degrees.
Yeah, much more carefully than, say, the southern states like Alabama, Georgia, Florida. We're the only governor who's actually a doctor. And so and he's coordinating closely with Maryland Republican Governor Hogan, Mayor Bowser in Washington, D.C. We're trying to do it all together, so carefully and thoughtfully. The good news is we have a clientele, a population that is very smart, educated, and very science savvy. So people aren't rushing to go to the racetracks or the beaches here.
We hear a lot.
Exactly.
We hear a lot from experts and so-called experts about what the recovery, when it comes to the economy, will look like. You, as I say, are vice chair of the Joint Economic Committee in Congress. Give us a sense, if there is a sense up in Congress, about how people perceive the recovery, what it's going to look like, how fast it will come.
Well, Dave and I talked to lots and lots of economists, so I probably turn to them more than the members of Congress. And with the exception of Jason Furman's recent piece where he suggested maybe a little more V-shape, most all economists across the spectrum are thinking a flatter U-shape. That is, it's going to take a long time until we get a vaccine. Things like movie theaters and restaurants and barbershops and many, many other places are going to have a very different and much smaller business platform. I think we've been really emphasizing the need for challenge studies, anything to get the vaccine here faster.
Is it possible to get the vaccine here faster from what you've studied, what you've heard? Because we heard actually from Dr. Fauci today, he thinks it might happen at the end of this year, potentially.
Yeah, I think two interesting things. Number one is via challenge studies. Taking volunteers who are willing to not only to be vaccinated, but then also be willing to be infected with the disease. They have to be young and healthy and promise health care. But that could speed it up. The other deal is, rather than the traditional vaccine method, the CRISPR technology that they've been developed so much at Harvard, MIT, and other places, there are 3 really interesting CRISPR studies that would fundamentally change the way our body reacts to the virus. And, we're able to do things we weren't able to do even 10 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. It would be great if CRISPR came through for us. Thank you so much. Really great to have you with us, Congressman. That is Don Beyer, Democratic Congressman from Northern Virginia, and, as I say, Vice Chair of the Joint Economic Committee. Coming up, will the U.S. economy be helped or hurt by Republicans come November? We're going to talk with Bloomberg opinion columnist Jonathan Bernstein about that question. That's next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. stocks are mostly lower. Companies that will benefit from an economic recovery are mostly higher, but tech stocks are falling amid rising tensions with China. The Dow is up 275 points, S&P up 13, NASDAQ falling 39. This is turning into a tough day at Boeing. They're starting involuntary layoffs. They notified almost 7,000 employees that they will be affected. And the unfortunate list of retailers filing for bankruptcy amid the pandemic is a little longer today. Discount chain Tuesday morning is seeking Chapter 11 protection and plans to close 230 of its 687 stores as it reorganizes. Also reorganizing under Chapter 11 are JCPenney, J.Crew, and Neiman Marcus. Bankrupt Pier 1 plans to liquidate. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Hi, I'm Danica Patrick. Watching my nieces grow, play, and learn is amazing, but not every child gets to be carefree. 1 in 6 kids in the U.S. are hungry. This breaks my heart, and it's something that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and gives it to families in need. To help, visit feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
COVID-19. Can the world reopen for business?
Give us a sense of how you're ramping up and taking care of folks on the ground.
What's the long-term impact?
Why will we not see a V-shaped recovery?
When will there be a cure or a vaccine?
How can you model that at a time when it's unclear whether we're going to see a resurgence in viruses?
The answers will emerge.
Can you give us a sense of timing?
And you'll find them here. Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. In-depth analysis,
At NatWest, we're putting our money where your business is. We've set aside £5 billion of working capital funding for our customers and have already lent over $3 billion to businesses like yours. So if you bank with NatWest and COVID-19 has affected your business, remember, every one of us is here to support you. Search NatWest Business Coronavirus.
Figures for RBS Group. Security may be required. Over 18s only. Subject to status. Business use only.
The right time with Bomani Jones.
While he was gone, Al had some kind of vote to make him the managing. You remember he used to come up all the time in the Raiders game that he was the managing general partner. By the way, don't forget, there was a lot going on in Munich. But you know how tired that man was to come back and find out that Al Davis had strong-armed his team from him while he was gone?
Search The Right Time with Bomani Jones to listen.
Keep up with everything happening in the wild world of pro wrestling with a podcast on TuneIn. For expert analysis straight from the WWE to Steve Austin's no-holds-barred conversations with wrestling's biggest personalities, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling to listen.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
He does! Fabry wins it!
To standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your 7th inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, well, Jeter Downs didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting 9 podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player.
active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
Round the bases with the StatCast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks, Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Where do sports, culture, and basketball nostalgia collide? On their podcast, Knuckleheads, NBA veterans Quentin Richardson and Darius Miles sit down with athletes, musicians, and entertainers to get brutally honest, totally unguarded conversations about everything from current events to untold stories from the golden era of sports.
Shaquille O'Neal. You know that, right? I tried to tip dunk all the free throw line one time.
Search Knuckleheads on TuneIn to listen.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Balance of Power with David Weston.
Some Democrats, coming up on Balance of Power, some Democrats are almost wishing that the economy doesn't recover until after the election in November. Bloomberg opinion columnist Jonathan Bernstein will be here to talk about whether that matters. But first, let's get a market check with Charlie Pellet.
Hi, thank you very much, David Weston. Looking at a mixed market right now, investors shying away from those high-flying tech names in favor of equities, most beaten down by the coronavirus pandemic. Cruise lines and airlines among them. For example, Carnival Corp up 4.4%, Royal Caribbean up 5.6%, Norwegian up 4%. Among some of the airline names, UAL up 2.6%, American up 5.6%, Delta up now by 1.2%. Equities mixed though, the S&P up 10, a gain of 0.4%, the Dow up 234, up 0.9. NASDAQ on the minus side, down now by just about 37 points, a drop there of 0.4%. 10-year up 7/32 with a yield of 0.67%. Gold up 0.1%, 17.12 the ounce, and crude now down by 4%. West Texas Intermediate now at $32.95 a barrel. Federal Reserve Bank of New York President John Williams says policymakers are, quote, thinking very hard about targeting specific yields on Treasury securities as a way of ensuring borrowing costs stay at rock-bottom levels beyond keeping the benchmark interest rate near zero. Williams made the comments this morning in an interview with Bloomberg Television and Radio.
I think we have a lot of options in terms of our toolkit, whether, we've used obviously forward guidance of different types in the past. We've clearly used, asset purchases to affect financial conditions in the past. And the yield curve control, which has now been used in a few other countries, is I think, a tool that can potentially complement forward guidance and or other policy actions. So this is something that obviously we're thinking very hard about.
The U.S. arm of the bakery chain Le Pain Quotidien has filed for bankruptcy in Delaware with plans to sell itself for $3 million in order to avoid shutting down for good. Recapping, stocks mixed, S&P up 7, up by 0.3%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It's time now for Bloomberg Opinion, and we welcome today columnist Jonathan Bernstein, who has a piece out about an election scenario he says Democrats needn't dread. Jonathan, welcome so much for coming. So tell us about what they may be dreading, that is to say, a recovered economy before they can get Donald Trump out of office.
Right. Well, right now the economy is tanking, but some projections show that there'll be at least headline numbers that look on the surface really strong as we move towards the election. Because economic activity has come to a complete halt. If it comes back, 3/4 of the way, that still makes for some very good economic headlines. And, the problem is that we don't really know in this situation, which is unprecedented, how that's going to play out in elections.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that anybody would really root for the economy not to do well. But go to the second point you make there, which is how does it play out in the elections? Suppose we are on the rebound. We clearly won't be back all the way, but on the rebound. Does it make a big difference?
Well, let me just clarify that as far as what the Democratic Party is doing, we've got a $3 trillion measure passed in the House. So the Democrats are not, whatever their fears are about the November election, they're not letting it affect their policies. But yeah, the thing is we don't know. Generally, we would expect the rate of change to matter more than the level of change. So that, improving economy should help the incumbent president. But, does it count as improving to people? Do people feel like the economy is getting better if unemployment is still over 10%, if, overall levels of GDP are still well below where they were at the beginning of the year? And, we just don't know because there's no precedent to base it on.
And is the electorate that nimble to turn their position? Because I certainly have seen some reports, you probably have too, where some economists have really done a study that say, well, the most important thing is actually disposable income in the second quarter, not the third, the second quarter, because there's a lag.
That's exactly correct. In terms of, the people who have done the modeling of this, both economists and political scientists over the year, find that disposable income second quarter seems to be the most predictive element. But, we've never had it falling off the table to this extent, and we've never had a recession that was deliberately planned by the government and everybody else to fight an epidemic. So, whether voters are willing to give a pass, if they thought that the government was overall doing a good job controlling the coronavirus, they might very well give a pass to Donald Trump over temporary economic pain. If they think that he's doing a bad job on the coronavirus, which mostly the polls show that they are, then they may be not much less forgiving.
Yeah, at the same time, we've got a long way between here and November as a practical matter, and people sometimes have short memories. In your estimation, Jonathan, is that going to be the election, that is to say, a vote up or down on President Donald Trump's handling of this crisis? Well,
I'd say in general, it will be about Donald Trump. What the Democrats do isn't going to make much of a difference. Who the Democratic candidate isn't going to make much of a difference. Joe Biden will do for people who are looking to go after the president. We don't know. People's memories are very, very short. It's even within the realm of possibility, if the coronavirus is out of the news by then, that won't be important to people. Assuming that it's not out of the news, then it'll be an important issue. This president has shown maybe a unique ability to just appeal to his base and not have to worry about a broader set of popularity, unlike other presidents. How does that color what's going on? Have we really seen an election like this before, apart from maybe his run against Hillary Clinton? I don't really agree with that. Most presidents do very, very well with their strongest supporters. And we saw in the midterms, for example, that when Donald Trump had lousy approval ratings in the midterms, Republicans did badly. And that's been true for special elections and off-year elections and all that. So I don't really think that there's any particular reason to think that his polling numbers will do a bad job of predicting what happens to him in the election. Well, I guess what I'm saying is this. We have not, as I understand it, had a president before elected with the level of approval that he had. He typically has not gotten out of the 40s, right? Well, and there's where there's a real difference